50 عاما على النصر المجيد.
مهما كانت التضحيات ومهما كانت تكاليف هذه المعركة هنحارب معركة.
أحلف بسماها وبترابها، أحلف بترابها وأبوابها، أحلف بسماها وبترابها، أحلف بترابها وأبوابها، أحلف بالقمح وبالمصنع، أحلف بالمدنى وبالمدفع، بولادي بأيام الجاية ما تغيب الشمس العربية طول ما أنا عايش فوق الدنيا. أحلف بسماها وبترابها، أحلف بترابها وأبوابها، أحلف بالقمح وبالمصنع، أحلف بالمدنى وبالمدفع، بولادي بأيام الجاية ما تغيب الشمس العربية طول ما أنا عايش فوق الدنيا.
الجمهورية العربية المتحدة سوف تعبر قناة السويس لتتولى مسؤوليتها الوطنية على الضفة الشرقية للقناة.
أقول باختصار أن هذا الوطن يستطيع أن يطمئن ويأمن بعد خوف أنه قد أصبح له درع وسيف.
مساء الخير وكل سنة وحضراتكم طيبين. 50 عاما مضت وما زالت الذكريات.
The 50th anniversary of the 6th of October victory and memories are still alive. 50 years can tell us an amazing chapter in the history of this nation. Half a century ago, everything was quiet on the front and no one would have imagined that this Egyptian silence is just paving the way for the turmoil. And at 2 p.m. on the 6th of October 1973, the Egyptian planes started their strike, launching the strike and bombarding the forces of the enemy East Suez Canal. One day, Golda Meir said that the struggle with the Arabs won't come to an end except with the death of the generation of October. Yet, the wisdom of this generation survived to fill the hearts and the minds with wisdom. And Moshe Dayan said that the Arab is a nation that does not understand. And when it reads, it does not apply what it understood. And we replied to him that we read the books of wars and learned their wisdom, and afterwards we gave them to our next generations and grandsons so that they would keep it after our death, so that our heritage would be there as long as Egypt survives. Welcome to this exceptional coverage for Egypt's celebration of the 50th anniversary of the 6th of October victory. I would like to welcome my colleague Riham Sahli, and we'll start this coverage with important information about the wall of strikes that enabled taking the decision of launching the war. Several heroic acts carved by the heroes of Egypt and armed forces soldiers. Egypt has never felt before reassured, except when it took the decision to take the war in 1973, and after establishing the anti-plane wall on the front of the forces. And it was built during the time of late President Gamal Abdel Nasser. It had separate groups of air defense, artillery, as well as units of strikes, in addition to radars and warning systems and alarm systems, in addition to joint control rooms that were established by Egypt to confront Israeli air strikes during 1970 till 1969. Israel launched all air defenses to prevent the formation of this wall, and in that raid hundreds of Egyptian builders were martyrs. And on the 30th of June 1970, all the strikes and were able to face Phantom and Skyhawk, and they were able also to take hostages 3 Israeli pilots, and afterwards about 12 Israeli planes were shot in what was called the week of shooting the Phantom. And this is a day that is celebrated by air defense every day. And afterwards came the 6th of October. the great legend as on this wall. The legend of the undefeatable enemy came to an end, and the enemy incurred 326 Israeli planes that were lost, in addition to 22 Israeli captives. And this is a new legend that the whole world realized on the 6th of October 1973, and they realized that the sky of this nation has men who work day and night to defend it, and they have enough capabilities and abilities to turn it into hell for those who would think of coming close to it. Glorious days kept in history to remind us that the Egyptians are people of will and determination, and this kind land would always survive so long as it has a sword and a shield. Yes, half a century passed and the struggles type has changed, but no doubt October's victory is always there in the memories, hearts and minds of Egyptians. The memory would always be there, and the legends would be on our minds. The wisdom would be inherited a generation after the other, because it was done by a generation capable of protecting this land and sacrificing himself through owning the reasons of strength to impose the will of peace. On the 11th of September 1972, I became a conscript, and I was trained on T tanks and T-55 tanks. So they selected the best elements in this group, and I was the first. On day 1 at 2 p.m., planes hit inside Sinai, and afterwards the artillery started. And Sinai turned into black and red. Of course, we received the decision to cross over the canal by the end of this day, the 6th of October. When the engineers finished building the bridges for us to cross over, because we have heavy machinery, and it is difficult for heavy machinery to cross over without these bridges. So, of course, we crossed over them with a certain number of personnel, because the bridges, of course, cannot carry more than 1 or 2 machineries. I was injured during this war, and I went to Qasr al-Aini hospital. I was treated there. My mother and father received news that I'm dead. Of course, my father came to see me. He told me, if you would tell me who hit you, I told him, what would you do for him? And when my mother received me at the door of the house, she said, we are not going to cry because I'm the mother of the hero. Of course, I had 3 hopes before crossing over. The first was to cross over Suez Canal, and the second was to kiss the soil of Sinai, and the third was to topple the Israeli flag and to raise the Egyptian flag. If I come back in history, I would want to participate in this war. It gives me great honor to be part of this war and to share this war with all these heroes. Of course, I wanted to be a martyr like all those martyrs who died during this war, and I consider the men who went through this war to be men of a specific time, men who were there at this moment to do that war, and they did it in the best manner. As you saw, and we will see, glorious victory that opens files once more and reminds us of great heroic stories through struggle, battles, up till the years of preparation for the battle and the crossing over. That great day, that day that enabled a great nation to restore its dignity. The path to the victory is the title, and the victory did not start on the 6th of October, but it started few days after the defeat of June 1967. The path started with the Battle of Ras El Aish, that battle that was followed by orders to give an Egyptian strike against the enemy's forces on the 15th and 16th of July 1967, and then the battle started. This nation can be reassured and feel safe after fear because it now has a sword and a shield.
ويجيء يوم نجلس فيه لنقص ونروي ماذا فعل كل منا في موقعه وكيف حمل كل منا أمانته وأدى دوره، كيف خرج الأبطال من هذا الشعب وهذه الأمة في فترة حالكة ساد فيها الظلام ليحملوا مشاعل النور وليضيئوا الطريق حتى تستطيع أمتهم أن تعبر الجسر ما بين اليأس والرجاء.
The armed forces was rebuilt and the Egyptians raised their slogan, what was taken by power and strength won't be restored except by power and strength. And the Egyptians were able to make the enemy incur a lot of losses by the destruction of Eilat in 1967. And then the phase of deterrence and confrontation started between 1968 and 1969 that witnessed the most important Egyptian strikes along the front and in depth of the Israeli forces, and with infiltration of a number of important posts of the enemies, as the enemy's forces were incurred a lot of losses in machineries and personnel. These strikes carried the hope for the Egyptians, and Egypt went down the path and it started the ferocious attempt to prepare for the victory of 1973. And all these legends were crowned by building the missiles wall, as the Egyptian air defense forces were able to shell the planes of the enemy in what was known the week of the Phantom. The land of Sinai for 6 years. The victory of the 6th of October was not a coincidence. It was attained due to wise planning from the political and military leadership that has developed a plan for strategic maneuver through hiding any signs of preparation for the war, putting the state of no war and no peace in order to get well prepared for the battle. The Egyptian armed forces did not stop its preparations even on the day of crossing over on the 5th of October 1973, when 31 fighters from the Egyptian Navy, along as personnel from the special forces who has dived towards the side of the bank, preparing their machineries and equipments to close the pipelines and to stop everything before the crossing over of the Egyptian soldiers. And on the 6th of October 1973 at 2 p.m. The battle started with 222 fighter planes that crossed over Suez Canal above the Israeli forces at the same moment. Next, after 5 minutes, more than 2,000 artilleries as well as a lot of missiles started bombarding the enemy forces for 53 minutes, paving the way through these fires. And afterwards, a group started crossing over, taking over the Israeli tanks and destroying these tanks to prevent them from intervening in crossing over of the main forces. And at 2:20 p.m., the artillery finished its first firing for 25 minutes, and during the second firing, the wave of crossing over started with the infantry on wooden and rubber boats, and with the crossing over for 15 minutes up till 4:30 p.m. 8 waves of infantry has crossed over the canal, and on the east front of the canal there were 5 bridges, and with the crossing over of the waves of infantry, the armed engineers were opening loopholes and holes in the sand wall in 81 different posts, as well as removing 3 million cubic meters of sand using water pumps. That Israel has mentioned a lot that this is the strongest sand wall in history, but it was not able to stand a lot in front of the Egyptian armed forces. Egypt was able to achieve this victory as Barlef was crossed over in only 6 hours since the beginning of the battle. And our air defense made the air defense of Israel incur a lot of losses and prevented it from using napalm cylinders and prevented Israel from targeting a lot of targets in Egypt, and they restored Suez Canal and part of Sinai. The number of the armed forces that participated were 80,000 soldiers, while the number of tanks that participated in crossing over were 1,000 tanks. As for the number of Israeli tanks that were destroyed on this day, it was 300 tanks. The armed forces was able to take control over 10 kilometers square of Israeli lands on this day. And it was able to destroy 20 missile batteries for the Israeli air defense on this day. So the military strategy succeeded in destroying the theory of Israeli security in most of its points. So these natural barriers between both forces did not prevent the Egyptians from writing the victory of 1973. Israel at that time tried to stop the depletion of its forces, and it was forced to accept the initiative of U.S. Secretary Faremos. They stopped the fire in August 1970, and Israel announced by its leaders that the war was the first military battle lost by Israel in its battle with the Arabs, and the tanks and the firing stopped, but there started another Egyptian struggle to prepare for the comprehensive war. The Egyptian plan was based on main pillars. The first is that the victory is the only option, and surprising them is the main element to apply this plan. And Suez Canal is just a road that we need to cross over. And the abortion of the attacks of the enemies is an important element. And removing Bar-Lev line is the beginning, and forcing the fortresses to defend themselves is just one of the keys of victory. Egypt had to stop the air defense, whose theory and forces were destroyed in front of the courage of the Egyptian fighter.
أحمد، خلينا ننتقل دلوقتي لزملائنا يعني.
To our colleagues Nancy Noor and Hammam Mejahid, who are right now at El Manara Center for International Conferences to follow up this symposium that would be held on the 50th anniversary of the victory of October. Nancy. Riham, I would like to welcome you and welcome Ahmed. Dear viewers, peace be upon you, peace on the soul of every soldier who sacrificed his life for this country. Peace upon every commander who planned and managed his battle. Peace be upon the Egyptian armed forces that achieved the miracle of October great victory. Peace to the political leadership that continued it smartly until it was able to restore every scrap of the soil of land. Welcome Nancy, and welcome to you all. Peace be upon you and all the nation that supported its soldiers until they restored Sinai. Peace upon every family that sacrificed its son for the victory of October, and those who were the reason for every Egyptian victory. The 6th of October would be a title and a source of pride and victory for the great people of Egypt and our armed forces. This date that is considered to be a legend craved in the Egyptian history, and it was an honorable end of a path and a march of sacrifices, planning, strategic thinking, as well as heroic acts to liberate the land from the Israeli occupation until we're able to restore every scrap of the land of Egypt. And it is a great victory for the Egyptian military and policy. Egypt is celebrating the Golden Jubilee of the victory of October that has drawn the future for the coming generations to move steadily towards achieving peace, stability, security, and prosperity in a country that enjoys dignity and freedom. 6th of October war has always amazed the world for multiple reasons, one of which is the courage and bravery of the Egyptian soldiers in defending their lands, and also the genius commanders and leaders who came up with innovative ideas for the crises the Egyptian forces met, and they were able to overcome them. Yes, many who were able to meet their promises. They sacrificed everything so that our flag would always be high and so that Egypt would enjoy peace and security. The Egyptian soldier during the war was able to remove the barrier of fear from the western bank to the eastern bank. The Golden Jubilee of October victory, and it will always remain in the collective memory of this nation. The spirit of October would always inspire all generations. The lessons of war would always survive all areas. And the 6th of October victory is victory of land, civilization, science, work, determination, and will. October is a victory of hope. Yes, Hammam? October war has certain signs inscribed in history. A lot of battles during which the Egyptian fighter was able to show that he's always capable of defending his rights and that the right based on strength always prevails. We will try to talk about a number of battles that led to a lot of martyrs and were main reason for this victory that we are celebrating. One of these battles was Tabbat al-Shajara battle. This battle happened on the 8th of October 1973. The main objective was to take control over the control post of the Israeli forces in Tabbat al-Shajara. This area is 10 kilometers east Suez Canal, and a brigade of tanks went to this place, and then orders were given to the Egyptian forces so that the infantry would be on the tanks. They were 10 tanks with 45 infantry personnel with their light weapons, RPG, guns, in addition to going to the operation place. During this battle, 2 tanks were shot and the enemy started withdrawing the rest of the tanks using fighting and fire. And then the Egyptian forces and the Egyptian soldiers were able to take control over Tabbat al-Shajara post and prevent the enemy from taking control over it, forcing them to leave all the equipments in this post after 7 successive hours. All these battles make us proud of our armed forces, the Egyptian army, and our Egyptian heroes. Another battle is Ayun Musa battle, one of the battles of the 6th of October that happened in Ayun Musa on the 7th and 8th of October 1973. The forces of the 3rd Army was fighting east the canal and they were victorious. Also, the 19th Infantry Brigade under Commander Yusuf Abififi was able to take control over the posts of the enemy on the east bank that has 6 rockets. And the enemy was using these rockets to bombard Suez Governorate during the war, and the Egyptian forces were not able to destroy it, although they shot at it using all different types. Most of these battles are called after the names of the areas and sites, and this shows that the battle was taking place at every stop. And one of the other battles is Al-Qantara Sharq that was built by the Israeli forces in Al-Qantara Sharq. And it was one of the biggest fortresses, and it has 7 fortresses. The battle went on for 2 successive days on the 7th and 8th of October. On the 8th of October, Brigade 18 Infantry Commander Fuad Aziz Ghali was able to liberate Al-Qantara Sharq safety after besieging it, and then they got into it, and the battle took place in the streets of Qantara and inside the buildings until the enemies were defeated, and they took control a number of ammunition, equipments and machines, tanks, and they took 30 soldiers as captives. And it was broadcasted in the evening of the 8th of October through Cairo radio that the city was liberated, and it has a good impact on everybody. Hammam, you can think the idea of the victory, the Egyptian radio, when it broadcasts that we have been victorious in all these battles. This makes us all feel proud, and even talking about these battles again make us always feel victorious. Another battle, El Firdan battle, it took place on the 8th of October 1973. Commander Hassan Abu Sa'da in the Second Army faced the attack that was carried by the Israeli forces. The Egyptian army was able to destroy all their tanks and to take the leader Asaf Yaguri as a captive. And during the battle, the Israeli tanks tried to take control over the post of the Egyptian forces towards El Firdan bridge, and the closer the Israeli tanks got, the hope of the commander came closer. But the surprise was that the tanks were destroyed by the Egyptian fire and the anti-artillery machineries. It is so important that when we tell these stories, to tell them through a national Egyptian story, to confront all other stories that we might hear. The current battle that I'm going to relate is one of the biggest air battles. Of course, the battle was in different fields, but El Mansoura air battle was an air battle between the Egyptian air forces and the Israeli air forces. This battle happened on the 14th of October 1973, and this battle started with the attempt of the Israeli air forces to destroy the bases of the Egyptian armed forces in El Mansoura and in the Nile Valley governorates, so that they would be able to control the Egyptian land forces. Israel launched a strike of 100 fighter planes, F-40 Phantom and Skyhawk, to destroy El Mansoura air base. This battle lasted for 53 minutes, and during that battle 180 fighting planes participated. Most of them were from the enemies, and 17 fighter planes were shot, and 3 Egyptian fighters were shot, in addition to losing 2 because loss of fuel and the inability of the pilots to get back to the airways. Also, a 3rd plane was destroyed while going through the remains of a plane. But with the determination and the will of the Egyptian forces, they were able to confront it. And this battle is considered to be the biggest air battle. This battle lasted for 53 minutes. And by this, the 14th of October is the day of the Egyptian air forces. 53 minutes of an air battle. We're talking about 180 fighting planes from both sides, and this is considered to be the biggest air battle in October War. Also, another battle is the Chinese farm battle. It started on the 15th and the 16th of October 1973 on the east bank of Suez Canal. The Egyptian forces won this battle through elements from the 2nd Egyptian Army, and this was the name used by the Israeli forces because having Chinese letters on these pumps at this agriculture station, and this station was strategically important because it is on the road leading to Abu Tartur. A lot of battles, yes, and a lot of stories that should be related by the Egyptians instead of the stories that we hear every while from some of other countries. Nancy, let's get back to the colleagues Ahmed Al-Tahri and Riham Al-Sahli, and then we'll be back before the beginning of this conference. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Hammam. Riham, the record of heroism is full. They talked about the Chinese farm battle. When we mention it, we need to remember Chief of Staff Tantawi and the strategic tactic he used, how he made this trap for the Israeli forces, and we can imagine what happened to the Israelis. And let's ask Sharon what happened in the Chinese farm because of the chaos of information to claim an untrue history. If the victory has one defect, they wouldn't have left any piece of this land. Ahmed, on my way, I was thinking that October victory has a great significance, not only for the Egyptians, but also for the Arabs, and even every human being who loves Egypt. October is a moment in which Egypt brought all its civilization. The generations that did not witness these great moments and this great victory, be it you or myself and the next generations, it is not a must that we have lived this period to feel proud. Whenever October War victory is mentioned, we feel proud, and that's why we need to extend appreciation and greetings to the Egyptian army. What would have been the case if we were not victorious? So our greetings to the great army of Egypt, greetings to our great armed forces, greetings to October generation and the people of October. This generation that endured bitterness and was able to erase frustration to give us a flag that is up high, even if it is covered by the blood of our martyrs. Greetings and appreciation to the heroes, the martyrs, their families. Deep thanks and appreciation to the Egyptian army and all the Egyptians and those who love Egypt. Strong people own will. They cross over the impossible. Overcomes the horizon. Moves forward courageously. Destroys legends and myths through science and believing in Allah. They destroy the fortress of enemies. They own the certainty of the confident. Carry hope. They draw the smile of victory. And write the history of Egypt. October 73. The will of a generation that challenged the impossible. The military history will stop long to study the operation of the 6th of October 1973, when the Egyptian armed forces was able to overcome Suez Canal barrier and to cross over Bar-Lev line and build bridges on the east bank of the canal after it made the forces lose their balance in 6 hours only. The Egyptian armed forces did a miracle. This country can stay reassured and be safe as it has now a sword and a shield. Here is Cairo. Our forces succeeded in crossing over Suez Canal in a number of sections and took control over the enemy's control posts, and Egypt's flag was raised on the east bank of the canal. The Egyptian armed forces made a miracle.
وصد الأعادي وأفدي بروحي عيونك يا مصر.
هنا القاهرة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most
نجحت قواتنا المسلحة.
Our armed forces succeeded in crossing over Suez Canal along the confrontation line, and they took over the east bank of the canal, and our forces are right now continuing their battle successfully with the enemy.
أعلن لشعبنا
I announce to our nation and to the whole Arab nation that the centuries of defeat came to an end after the armed forces in Egypt and Syria, supported by the forces of the Arab nations, the first real victory for the Arabs since centuries. I promised Allah and promised you that our generation won't give its flag to a next generation with a defeat, but rather we will give our flags up high, expressing pride and glory. Let me seize the opportunity and the presence of Mr. Ahmad al-Tahri, who is an analyst and a journalist. Let us talk about this secret, the secret of Egypt's and the Egyptian army's victory and destroying all theories that used to say that the enemy's army is undefeatable and Berlin Line cannot be destroyed except using an atomic bomb. What's the secret? The secret is that the Egyptian is genius and he has a very strong will. As you mentioned, this war is a miracle. All the battles destroyed the idea of impossible. Those who would reconsider and reread the writings and the articles of that era would recognize this. I remember now a group of documents in the book of writer Haeckel at the crossroads. A lot of information about the first days of this war and the losses from documented British, Israeli and American sources about the losses incurred by Israel, and that Golda Meir called upon the US to help it, and also the air supply line that was formed by the US to support Israel and help it in this battle. We should not forget also the role of the Arab countries, how they supported us and they used the weapon of oil. And those who read also the strategic orders made by martyr Muhammad Anwar al-Sadat, the hero of peace and war, shows that he remembers all the details of this battle as if he was paving the way to peace. The strategic direction was built on the real capabilities of Egypt, the realistic abilities of the Egyptian forces, and the Egyptian artillery made the greatest legend. Also, all the Egyptian personnel who closed the napalm pipelines underneath Suez Canal, and also the Egyptian fighter and his determination to achieve this victory. So it's a moment during which Egypt revived all thousands of years of its civilization. One of the greatest results of this war was peace. The idea of attaining peace when you're victorious is totally different from coming because this is the only solution. You went to peace victorious and strong, and it was not Egypt who had to rely on peace, but it was the other enemy. Yes, in the victory speech, late President Sadat mentioned it. Yes, late President, may he rest in peace, in front of the Egyptian parliament said, I prefer being respected by the world without getting the compassion of the world and the sympathy without respect. Yes, we imposed our respect on everyone, and also the Egyptian army after 1967 was rebuilt to be victorious in 1973. This is the role of the people. Yes, people became patient. When you talk about the champions and the heroes, I remember that they were both on the battlefront and inside Egypt. Yes, and also we need to remember those who told us about the depletion war battles. Writer Gamal al-Ghitani told us about Rifa'i and what Rifa'i group did, and you will find that these fighting genes are inherited. Yes, since 2011 up till today, this Egyptian nation showed a lot of heroic acts, and it incurred a lot of things. So we have both heroes on the front and heroes inside Egypt. And also the fighting state went into Sinai with a construction plan and a plan to clear it from terrorism and achieved the dream of connecting Sinai to the valley through the tunnels. There was no development in Sinai before. The state was able to do it now, and now we see the contracts and the lands given to the people, and we see the efforts exerted in the construction and development of Sinai, and this is the best means to confront terrorism. Of course, security confrontation is a must, but on the long-term development is important. Let me remind you of something President Sisi said in 2015 or 2016. He said Sinai either would be for the Egyptians or for no one. Yes, exactly. A lot of efforts, and as you said, the Egyptians prove that they have these genes in October War, and up till today, the Egyptians, once they feel that someone is conspiring against Egypt, they turn into real heroes, and they show their strength. That's why they are always trying to defeat him spiritually, because they feel that no one would be able to defeat the Egyptian. Let's listen to October songs so that we can remember songs of victory. And before this, let us watch now the arrival of President Sisi to the headquarters of celebrating October War in El Manara International Conference Center.
إذا تابعنا مع حضراتكم مشاهدينا
I've
الأعزاء.
seen together, dear viewers, the arrival of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the President of the Republic, and the highest commander of the armed forces at El Manara Center to celebrate the Golden Jubilee of October victory. In a few minutes, this ceremony will start with the attendance of President Sisi, the President of the Republic, and the highest commander of the armed forces. Nancy, all these battles that we've mentioned and this glorious war has a lot of symbols. Of course, the great Egyptian nation that worked for this victory, in addition to a large number of commanders. We will try together to remember them, those commanders who sacrificed themselves and their efforts for restoring the occupied land. Yes, a lot of sacrifices were made, like Field Marshal Ahmed Ismail Ali, the Minister of Defense. In October 1973, he planned for the war and managed its operations. He was graduated from a military academy in the Soviet Union, carrying an honorary degree to participate in all the modern wars for Egypt, starting from World War II, Palestine War, and then the tripartite aggression, and then 1967 war and the depletion war, to crown his path with the victory of October 1973. After his scientific and practical experience enabled him to lead the Egyptian armed forces at that important moment. So he deserves to be one of the great heroes of this war. Yes, this is one of the most prominent Egyptian figures. In addition, also to Lieutenant General Saad al-Din al-Shazli. He was in the war of 1973, and he gave the 31 order, the real plan to cross over Suez Canal and cross over Berlin Line. He participated in World War II in addition to Palestine War in 1948 and established the parachuting forces in Egypt, and afterwards he was the commander of the first Egyptian unit for UN in Congo. In 1967, the General Command of Egypt made a decision to form a certain group under his name, so it was the only unit that came back from Sinai with all its weapons and machineries. He got a mission to the US, and he was the first one to get ringers training in the US, and he was qualified to be one of the great commanders of the armed forces. All these commanders contributed to this victory that enabled us to restore our land. And there is also Lieutenant General Mohammed Abdel Ghani, who was the head of the special operations in the armed forces in 1973 while preparing and planning for the war. And he also managed the military intelligence, and he was responsible for the staff during October War. He was graduated from Francois Academy in Soviet Union, participated in World War II, tripartite aggression, 1967 war, depletion war, and then October 1973. He participated in the final planning of Granite Plan to cross over Berlin Line, and was the head of the Egyptian delegate in the military negotiations with Israel at the end of the war. So he was a star in the sky of Egypt. And also Lieutenant General Mohammed Ali Fahmy, who was assigned by President Abdel Nasser to form the air defense in Egypt, and he participated in Palestine, tripartite aggression, 1967 depletion war, as well as October 1973 war, and also the war on liberating Kuwait. Francois Academy is from which he graduated, and he formed the missiles wall, without which Egypt wouldn't have been able to cross over, as he neutralized the ability of the Israeli air forces and prevented them from coming close to the canal, and this was the key to victory. Each one of those commanders is a real symbol of this war, strategic planning that makes us all proud and think of what they did. And there is also Lieutenant General Fuad Zikri, the commander of the Egyptian Navy in 1973, participated in Palestine, tripartite war, aggression. In 1967 and October 1973, one of the most prominent commanders, and he became afterwards the field marshal and planned for the greatest naval operations against the Israeli enemy, and gave his orders to Port Said naval base to destroy Eilat. And during the war of 1973, he planned for the siege of Bab el-Mantab Strait that turned Eilat port into a dead body. And he succeeded in securing all Egyptian ports during the war against any intervention from the Israeli naval forces. We are so proud of all these commanders, and there is also Major General Fuad Nassar, and he was able to provide all accurate information about the location and posts of Israeli forces, and he established Sinai Liberation Authority, and he trained a lot of people from Sinai, providing them with wireless equipment so that Egypt can trace all Israeli movements in Sinai, in addition to developing the plan to deceive the Israelis that prevented them from identifying Egypt's plan. In addition to this large number of military commanders, we need to honor and remember also the resilience of the people of Canal Governorates, Port Said, Suez, and Ismailia, who insisted on supporting this victory. If we look at the history of this phase, we will find a lot of resilience on part of the Egyptians, and we can remember our grandfathers when they told us about this war. They used to tell us a lot of stories about their patience and supporting the Egyptian armed forces and the political leadership. And this love to the Egyptian armed forces lasts up till today, because it is from the Egyptians and for the Egyptians. Appreciation and greetings to the great people of Egypt, the families who were in Suez back then, and we all know the resilience of the people of Suez or in all other Egyptian governorates. The President of the Republic and the highest commander of the armed forces. Peace be upon you. Many happy returns. Take your seats, please.
أكتوبر 73.
1973, 50 years for this great victory. In the name of Allah, Mr. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the President of the Republic and the highest commander of the armed forces, distinguished guests, welcome to this 38th cultural symposium celebrating the Golden Jubilee of the October War victory. The 6th of October is a great day that showed the great capabilities of the Egyptian armed forces and showed the unity of the nation and the army, and showed the meaning of sacrifice for the country. In the name of Allah, Allah is the greatest, was the slogan on that day that raised the determination and the will of the Egyptians. And this was the sign of support and paved the way for this great victory. This was the beginning, and the best beginning to celebrate this day is verses from the Holy Quran.
ولا يحسبن الذين كفروا سبقوا إنهم لا يعجزون وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخيل ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم وآخرين من دونهم لا تعلمونهم الله يعلمهم وما تنفقوا من شيء في سبيل الله يوفى إليكم وأنتم لا تظلمون وإن جنحوا للسلم فاجنح لها وتوكل على الله إنه هو السميع العليم وإن يريدوا أن يخدعوك فإن حسبك الله هو الذي أيدك بنصره وبالمؤمنين صدق الله العظيم.
صدق الله العظيم. يد الله يمس
The hand of Allah protects your sky, Egypt, and your voice is there always. And so long as your army is protecting you, you will move always steadily towards victory. Our martyrs is the best men who sacrificed their lives so that Egypt would live freely and it would have always a high flag. Celebrating the victory day, we need to extend thanks to the soul of the martyrs. Peace be upon all martyrs of Egypt. Salute to the martyr. Your Excellency, the President, good evening, distinguished guests. Many happy returns to you all. May we always enjoy happiness and peace. We are here together, convening today to celebrate together 50th anniversary of October victory. And in fact, before continuing my words, I would like to say that our great martyrs that we are all proud of are so important. We'd like to tell their families that they are always in our minds and hearts. I would like also to ask all mothers and fathers to tell their children the story of October victory, and to tell them that our Egypt is not just an old civilization, but it is also a modern civilization that has all the good things. We have a lot of places that we can visit and learn from and enjoy. I am so proud that in Egypt now we have a new documentary channel that documents and broadcasts everything that happens in our country. And as an anchor and a presenter and as an artist, I was honored and I was so glad when they told me that you will act in 2 films. First it was 1 film, and Mr. Ramses Nagim, the producer, called me and told me that we'll meet Mr. Ahsan Abdel Quddus, the great writer, And he wrote this film, The Bullet is Still in My Pocket. And I was back then so glad. And they told me that your name would be Fatma and you will represent Egypt. So I felt happy. And after a year, again, I acted as the wife of one of the injured soldiers in the war till the end of life, حتى آخر العمر, for writer Yusuf al-Sibai. I was so glad to play these two roles, and up till now in my memory I remember my story with these two films. And I would like to tell you that our army gave everything that we needed, the machinery, the equipment, the boats, the tanks, the weapons that we used in the movies. After Salah ad-Din citadel was restored, and I went to visit the National Military Army, and I found that there were a lot of holes showing the belongings of the Egyptian army, and those also that were taken from the Israeli soldiers and hostages. And I found a tank. I found that there was a tank with its pipe up high, while the other with its pipe down low. They told me that this is up high because this is our tank and it symbolizes victory, while the other symbolizes the defeat of the enemy. I tell always my sons and grandsons about October victory, and I'm so glad to tell you this. I apologize for being lengthy, and thank you very much, and many happy returns to you all. Let me invite you to enjoy this discussion with a group of professors who have lived through October war, and this discussion would be moderated by Osama Kamal. Thank you. Your Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the heroes of October victory. Your Excellencies, it gives me pleasure to stand here before you today, and it gives me honor to stand on the stage to celebrate the 6th of October victory. I'm surrounded by a lot of things from the National Military Museum in Salah ad-Din citadel. These are personal belongings as well as orders and medals, weapons that were collected from the Israeli soldiers during 1973, and also the weapons that were used by the Egyptian army. I was honored to visit the museum, and I would like to invite all Egyptians to visit it, even if they have visited before, and I hope that they would be accompanied by their sons and daughters, as they will see something very interesting, and you then will pray to our heroes, the martyrs, the injured ones, and those who are still alive. Your Excellency the President, distinguished guests, most of the people who are here with us today were not born in 1973 or were very young children, except of course the heroes of this victory. During that time the documentation was not enough, at least at the level of ordinary people, so the Israeli enemy tried to take control over the minds of the world, including the Egyptians, so they started to tell people lies and incorrect information. The enemy tried to turn itself from being defeated to being the winner. And here we need to document the victory of October. To avoid that, let me, Mr. President, start this session by inviting the Secretary General of the League of Arab States, Ambassador Ahmed Abu al-Ghait.
وبدعو سيادة اللواء محمود طلحة
Major General Mahmoud Talha, the former director of the Leaders College.
وأدعو الدكتورة مها
شهبة, the professor of media and the documentary producer.
والأستاذ محمد ممدوح
Mr. محمد ممدوح, the digital content maker on YouTube.
نبدأ هذه الجلسة الحوارية وأبدأ مع معالي الأمين العام
with the Secretary General of the League of Arab States. Did Egypt do all that could have been done before war and we had no other alternative but war?
هو في رأيي
In my opinion,
أن الحرب كانت
war
ضرورية
was a must.
منذ يوم 10 يونيو
Since the 10th of June 1967, the date of ceasefire.
مصر دولة كبيرة.
Egypt is a big country.
ضربت ضربة
and it was hit
عنيفة جدا.
violently.
وبالتالي كبريائها
So its pride and its self-respect and the respect of the whole region to Egypt and its ability to influence this region needed a new war to restore the strategic balance in the region. In the meantime,
المؤكد إنه النوايا الإسرائيلية كانت
the Israeli intentions, of course, were to keep the Egyptian territories. They would have never accepted to withdraw from it. And I think that the Egyptian leadership and the Egyptian people and I myself knew that there must be another war due to the philosophy
الجانب الإسرائيلي
of the enemy.
وبالتالي المهمة الأولى لمصر كانت هي
first mission for
في
Egypt
إعادة
was
بناء
to
قواتها
rebuild
المسلحة
its
مرة
armed
أخرى.
forces.
بناء قوات مسلحة
Building
قادرة
armed forces
بيستغرق سنوات.
needs
وبالتالي
years. So
هذه السنوات
these years
بذل جهد دبلوماسي
witnessed diplomatic
والعالم
efforts.
كان بيحاول
And the world
إنه
was
يقنع
trying
إسرائيل
to convince
بالتجاوب
Israel to
مع
respond
فكرة الانسحاب
to the
من
idea of
من الأراضي
withdrawal
المحتلة.
from the occupied lands.
وبرضو أنا شخصيا
And I
لم يكن
myself
لدي اقتناع
was not
إطلاقا
convinced at
إنه
all
الجهد الدبلوماسي
that the
هينجح.
diplomatic efforts would be successful.
وبالتالي
Accordingly,
استغرقنا 6 سنوات
it took
و3
us
أشهر
6 years and 3 months
نعيد بناء قواتنا
to
المسلحة.
rebuild our
ومع
armed
ذلك
forces. And despite
الجهد
that,
الدبلوماسي
the diplomatic
وقتها
efforts back then
كان في كثافة كبيرة جدا في السنتين
was
الأخيرتين
so
ولها أسبابها.
intensive, especially during the last
على
2
سبيل
years for
المثال
certain
أنا
reasons.
شخصيا
I
قرأت
myself read
برقيات على اتصالات مصرية
telegrams
أمريكية
about Egyptian US
يلتقي وزير الخارجية المصرية
contacts and meetings between Dr. Mohammed Hassan al-Zayed, the Egyptian foreign minister, with William
وزير
Rogers,
خارجية
the
الولايات
foreign minister
المتحدة
of the US,
في يوليو 72
in July
في نيويورك أثناء دورة الجمعية
1972
العامة.
in New York during the General
يقول له
Assembly.
شوف
He told him
من هزم
he who
في
was
المعركة
defeated in the
عليه
battle
أن يدفع الثمن
need to pay the price.
وبالتالي يتخلى عن
So he
الأراضي
need to give up
لصالح إسرائيل.
the lands for
يجي
Israel.
سنة
In
73
1973,
نفس الوزير
the same
أو
minister
كيسنجر
or
يقول
Kissinger
لوزير الخارجية المصرية في وقتها
tells the
زيات
Egyptian foreign
الزيات
minister Dr. Zayed,
إنه نحن ليس لدينا وقت
we do
نضيعه.
not have time to
معاك.
waste with you.
في هذا التوقيت
At that time,
رئيس السادات
President
قرر
Sadat
إخراج
decided
الخبراء السوفيت
to get the Soviet experts out of Egypt.
رسالة رصدها
This
الأمريكان.
was a message the U.S. recognized. So the Americans started focusing on the Egyptian stance, and they said, okay, we can hold with you different consultation rounds. We did 2 for the first time, one in February 1973 and another in May 1973. The first was in Long Island in the US and the second in Paris. Kissinger met the Egyptian National Security Advisor Mohammed Hafiz Ismail, and it was clear that both of them are incapable of reaching an agreement. So, when this was presented to President Sadat, he came up with the result that there should be a big military action to change things. The President held a meeting on the 30th of September 1973, 6 days before the war. And they decide upon the military action, and it starts and it ends by achieving the Egyptian objective. At that time, our objective was limited. It was getting part of the land, hitting the Israeli side, destroying Berlif line, confronting anti-attacks, and starting the negotiations to reach the Egyptian borderline with Israel. It took some time and some military actions, yet it is sure that you and I can go visit Taba today in east the borders and Rafah west the borders. So Egypt achieved its strategic goal from the war. That's it.
شكرا لحضرتك.
Thank you.
سيادة اللواء بعد 67
Major General, after 1967, how did we move from defeat to challenge, persistence, and then victory? What were the main lines to plan for this battle? In the name of Allah. In fact, since the end of 1967, the biggest effort for all commanders in the army at all levels and even the junior soldiers was thinking of liberating the land. Each one thought at his own level and according to his own specialty. So this planning happened in a cumulative manner according to the economic conditions, the general conditions, as well as providing weapons. The rule upon which this planning was based was studying the Israeli mindset as well as the theory of safe borders and studying the structure of Israeli defenses. The challenge was destroying the barrier of fear and stopping the decline of frustration for both the armed forces and the Egyptian people. Because of the defeat of 1967, this was the biggest thing. The most important sign in defeating this decline was Ra's al-Ish battle.
تسمحوا لنا ان احنا نقف لهم احتراما وتقديرا لو
Let's
سمحتوا.
stand in respect to them.
الحقيقه بعد اذن
معذره ان انا
لا العفو، يعني نوجه ايضا التحيه
Let's extend thanks and appreciation to the commander of this operation, Ahmed Shawqi, who we wished he had been here with us today, but he is unable to be here with us, and we pray for him a speedy recovery.
اتفضل سياده اللواء.
استاذن سيادتك في نبذه
Excuse
قصيره.
me, I want to give a brief idea about رأس العش battle.
رأس العش دي
رأس العش
نقطه جنوب بور
is a
فؤاد على
spot
الجانب
south
الشرقي
Port
لقناة
Fouad
السويس
on the east bank of Suez Canal.
وكانت لسه القوات الإسرائيلية ما وصلتش.
And the Israeli forces did not reach this spot yet. On the 29th and the 30th of June, so 3 weeks after ceasefire, while we are just building the armed forces, a decision was made to Brigade 33 and then 100 soldiers started moving at night, and while moving at night at swamps, they found that there are Israeli forces of tanks and armored vehicles supported by Hound are heading towards them. So the forces starting defending themselves and stopped the fire until the Israeli forces came into range, and they started shooting at them, and the battle went on for 6 hours. As a result was great losses for Israeli forces. And the other important thing was that the Israeli forces did not do it again up till 1973. Next, I will talk about the challenge securing crossing over Suez Canal, including a lot of tactically and technically complicated matters that were all overcame. I mean by challenges here tactical and difficult problems that conventional solutions cannot be used for. So the commanders came up with new ideas to overcome these difficulties. This challenge was how to climb the sand barrier by the soldiers carrying their light weapons. to destroy the fortresses that represent the first line of Berlif, and thanks God they were able to do it. The other bigger challenge was how to confront the enemy's tanks. Here I would like to mention a piece of information. According to the complications of crossing over Suez Canal, the infantry forces fought for 10 to 12 hours without one tank. And Israel at that time had 300 tanks. And if they mobilized them, they could be 900 tanks. This means that the infantry forces that would cross over need to have 600 to 900 tanks. According to the statistics made officially by General Sharon and General Ibrahim Adal, up till 1 a.m. on the 7th of October, Sinai forces had 180 tanks. And they were able to make the enemy incur losses by 63%. The next challenge after the tanks was the security theory that they were using, and this happened through the naval forces closing Bab el-Mandab Strait as well as attacking Berlif Line with a power of 5 groups, and so the safe borders were no longer there. The other important challenge to secure crossing over was implementing the theory of strategic deceit. And this was implemented and it enabled us to surprise not just Israel, but Israel and the whole world. Before finishing, I would like to mention that there are a lot of other operational matters I won't refer to, but I need to mention the great role played by the Bedouins of Sinai.
دورهم كان يتلخص في حاجات كتيرة أهمهم واحد
First, secured and supported our forces working in depth from 1967 up till 1973, and also providing a lot of important information about the positions and the posts of the enemy that enabled us, thanks God, to cross over. Deep thanks and appreciation to our people in Sinai who are here with us, and through them we would like to send greetings to all our people in Sinai. Dr. Maha, you have developed a number of documentaries, and you showed in it the desire of the Egyptian community to move from the state of frustration to state of challenge and then the state of victory. You showed people, ordinary people in Egypt, and even soldiers and commanders who wanted that. What did you show in your documentaries? First, why did I document that? I documented this because while working in the university, I found that the culture of the youth deteriorates year after the other, and they are not fully aware of our important historical events, especially October War, and this is considered to be something worrying, because how they would be inspired for the future without being inspired by the past and learning from the past. So I wanted to document these important moments, in particular the victory of October. I was keen on selecting examples that everyone can relate to. I selected junior soldiers, conscripts, nurses. I showed also the story of the alive soldier, Soldier Abdegawad Smith Whalam. In the depletion war, he lost his eye and his arm and both legs in heroic battles, and when the moment of crossover came, he insisted to be with his colleagues, even if an administrative post. I showed also the story of Abdelmenem Inawi from Suez. After 1967, he was a photographer, he was a young man, and throughout the depletion war, he started using his camera to monitor the enemy, and afterwards he participated in operations. He was part of the people who were fighting the tanks. And afterwards there is the story of El Kamshushi, a woman who was 19 years old. She was graduated from the Institute of Nurses, and she went to work in Suez. Her father told her, there is a war there, why would you go? She said, I will go anyways. She went, and there was siege on Suez and the hospital, and she breaks the siege to go and bring water for the soldiers. She talked about the operations she witnessed and those soldiers and heroes she saved, and one of them afterwards became her husband. And she told us how she was running towards a soldier and a missile hit the hospital, and the soldier told him, leave the hospital, and she refused to leave it. She told a lot of stories that do not need just a documentary but a big movie. When the tanks came at 10 a.m., there was a patient who has an amputated left arm, and he said, give me a weapon and we will fight them. So I used to bring the weapons and give it to them, and he took the gun under his arm and he destroyed the first tank, and then the other came. And the other has amputated both his legs. I gave him a weapon, and then two who were in a better condition came. Each one of them carried a weapon, and they destroyed the 7 tanks in front of the hospital. I was honored to be part of this war. And through Miss Sayeda, let me, Mr. President, quote what you said. Greetings to all the great women of Egypt. Mr. Muhammad, you are active on YouTube, the new media and the new social media, so you were able to address people in a different manner. This, of course, needed to monitor what is done by the other party in different languages and through different methods to reach out to our young people and youth and to reach the minds and hearts of the West. How did you monitor that? Thank you, Mr. Osama. Mr. President, my generation did not live the October War, and the next generations want also to learn about October War, and now it is so easy to access information. It is not a must just to learn what Israeli writers write, but what also Western writers write. And we find here strange things. First, we can go to a big writer to check a piece of information And we find an article that is very professional, but unfortunately we find that this writer made a simple mistake in every article. Everything is correct, and he also slips one piece of wrong information. He say, for example, that the injured ones are thousands while they were very few. This piece of information has a lot of significance, and this is the misinformation method. So he wrote this article to deliver this piece of information. This is the misinformation, and media has developed, and there is something new called the disinformation. Sometimes we find an article on a website or in a newspaper, and I find that the writer does not give just a small wrong piece of information, but he changes main information about the war. He changes the whole story. He reveals everything that happens in the war to try to convince the reader. This misleading information, it is the biggest thing in the coverage, that other writers use these quotations and they quote this writer. And we developed ourselves also moving to the information laundering, and this is a very dangerous method. We are not here talking about a newspaper or writer an article, but we're talking here about drama that delivers the story to the viewer. It's strange that the information laundering is not the style of an institution or a newspaper. This is done by states, because this drama costs a lot. And the most dangerous is its coverage. It goes to the social media influencers, and those who seek information start to take information from this drama, depending on the fact that the writer used documented, reliable sources of information. So we see that there are a lot of methods to spread wrong information and to tell you did nothing. But we are here before a unique Egyptian soldier. There is no soldier in the world who has all these temples and the pyramids. You will find that they are doing so to rewrite history, to distort your history and tell the next generation that you did nothing. On the contrary, you have defeats rather than victories. So we are before a great victory, and we need to realize that we did something great. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Mr. Secretary General of the League of Arab States, getting back to what was the state in the Arab region and the Arab streets. We were not just talking about Egypt won and Israel was defeated. The whole Arab world was considered to be victorious in this war. The Arabs participated through providing funding, weapons, personnel. So what was the case in the Arab region? And I think it was very honest. One of the important bright points in this context is the Khartoum Conference. The Khartoum Conference was attended by all the Arab nations, and the Arab nation in this conference refused the defeat and decided to support financially the confrontation countries. I remember that in Khartoum Conference it was agreed on 140 million sterlings for both Egypt and Jordan. Jordan would take 40 million and Egypt would take 95 million. The purchase power of this amount is not to be calculated according to today's prices. Back then, the purchase power of this amount was great. the Arab support
دول المواجهة
to the confrontation
يعني كان في
countries
4 محاور.
covered 4 elements:
محور الدعم المالي.
financial
استمر
support,
الدعم المالي
and the
طوال
financial support
سنوات
went on
المواجهة.
over the confrontation
الدعم
years, and
بقوات.
there was support
إن كان في
with
قوات
forces.
من
I
المغرب
remember that there were
أرسلت إلى
forces
الجبهة
from Morocco that
المصرية
went to
والسورية.
the Egyptian and Syrian
قوات من
fronts,
الجزائر.
forces from Algeria,
مقاتلات من الجزائر.
fighters
من الكويت.
from
المملكة العربية
Algeria,
السعودية.
Kuwait,
وأيضا
the
وأخيرا
Kingdom
من
of Saudi
العراق.
Arabia and Iraq.
وبالتالي في المحور
Accordingly,
الثاني أنا بديلك قوات.
they provided
محور
forces.
الثالث
The third element,
المهم للغاية
and the very
المهم
important
للغاية
one, was
هو محور البترول.
the oil,
لأنه البترول دخل في
because oil
سياق الحرب
was part of the war, and it was decided to reduce oil production since the 17th of October 1973 by 5% per month.
هذا كان له تأثير
And this had a great impact
إن أنا أتذكر
to the extent that I remember that
لواحد زي
Henry Kissinger, in his meetings with the foreign minister Ismail Fahmy in Washington on the 28th of October, was preoccupied by helping us to remove this embargo, so that there was financial support, support with forces, oil, production reduction, and the fourth element was the machineries and equipments themselves. I remember that Libya purchased fighters Mirage from France, and the Egyptian pilots were trained on them in France, and they used them during the war. I remember that MiG-17 came from Algeria. It was sent without pilots because Egypt did not have that enough numbers of fighting planes. I remember that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia approved to put the lightning fighting planes under the control of Egyptians, and 40 Egyptian pilots were trained on these planes. I remember also that Iraq put a fleet of Hawker Hunter fighting planes under the control of the Egyptian army in Al-Mazab airport. And there is another last dimension I need to remember. For example, the Egyptian military academy was moved to Sudan, and it was hosted by the Sudanese, so that the Egyptians would be away from any difficulties while they are studying and get prepared to be soldiers. I remember that the heavy Egyptian fighting planes T-16 were sent to Iraq, and in Al-Habbaniya airport these fighting planes were there, and the Egyptian pilots were trained on navigating them, and then afterwards they got back to Egypt. The Arab support was great at the level of the UN and also at the level of contacts. Arab foreign ministers went on a lot of missions to Washington in an attempt to convince the US to take more positive stances supporting Arabs. So the whole Arab nation stood up to support the war, Egypt and Syria, who fought on two fronts, and the war on two fronts had an objective, that Israel would divide its forces over two spots that are 70 kilometers away, so they would neither be strong here nor strong there. Thank you. We wish that our Arab nation would restore again this spirit, and this whole Arab world would be always our source of pride. Major General, our young people are well educated, they have the language, so when they go and listen to the lies about Egypt in different places, sometimes we do not provide with enough information to enable them to reply to any of these lies. What should we tell them to be ready? In fact, there is a question that has been there for long regarding the outcome of 1973 war. This question comes from a lot of people as a query or to feel reassured, but some want to raise doubts. I will answer, and I hope my answer would cover these 2 points. In my answer, I will not talk about the Egyptian viewpoint. I will leave the Egyptian viewpoint to geography, history, and reality. I will mention some rules in strategy and policy, and then the Israeli side will give me the answer. It is known that war is an extension of a policy using other means, and war at the end of the day should provide suitable circumstances to be used by the political powers either to support or continue or develop and make use of what was achieved by the army. Of the military and strategic sciences, we say that the essential criterion and the only essential criterion to measure victory or defeat is to what extent the war achieved its objective or the objectives for which it was launched. If the objective was attained, then there is victory. If the objective is not attained, whatever the power and whatever the costs and the losses are, then there was no use. Let's move to the Israeli side. General Halim Herzog, who was the head of the Israeli intelligence, wrote a book about 1973 war. In this book he said the following: the Israeli army in 1967 achieved an astonishing victory, yet a number of military errors were made during that war. But victory did not pay the attention towards these errors. So I say that the winner does not trial his commanders and his leaders. This is the first rule. And then the last thing that happened in the war was Agranat Committee. It is a judicial committee presided over by the judge of the Supreme Court and 2 judges and 2 former chiefs of staff who developed the Israeli security theory. So the formation decision was in November 1973. And it was formed due to the Israeli pressure on the government, because the community felt that the defeat in 1973 was grave. So this is the significance of the timing. The committee was formed at that time, not after 50 or 60 years. It was formed in November 1973, when the war has just taken place. This is the first meaning. Secondly, war did not come to an end yet, and the Egyptian forces were along the canal, on the east bank of the canal, and the Egyptian forces on west the canal were besieging the Israeli forces, and they were implementing all the plans. Suez city was resilient. No one was able to get into it. In this committee, they questioned 73 politicians and commanders, and a lot of witnesses from the soldiers and the commanders gave their testimonies. The truth appeared in this committee. They held 147 sessions for the committee. And at that time, the chief of staff was the general commander and was responsible for securing the forces east and west the canal. And he was responsible for the negotiations back then to secure his forces east and west the front, and to secure the position of Israel politically in any negotiations. So he was responsible for this process, and he was also under investigation. The Israeli media talked about this committee by using three terms. First, defeat. Second, failure, and finally they adopted the term of shortcomings, and the report of the committee said that there was negligence on part of these commanders and officials, and so on. So when the chief of staff learned about the formation of this committee, according to his diaries, he went to the prime minister, and I will mention one sentence from what he said. He told her, "Let us first investigate with ourselves, and we will get to know the reasons of the defeat." Do not ask to punish the commanders of the army now. The army is not over its shock yet. This is not your army, and you do not have a better army. If you would form this committee, then this is the shortcoming and the error. General Sharon, after the committee finished its proceedings, in his diaries he said that the committee was able to analyze the reasons of the failure. And on the same page, he said that the U.S. bridge saved Israel from a disaster. The decision of the committee was the dismissal of the chief of staff, the commander of the South position forces, and they brought someone else to be the commander of this area. And it acquitted the prime minister and the minister of defense for political reasons related to the position of both of them. But the people did not accept this result. Then the head of the government and the minister of defense resigned because the people refused to let them continue their work. So I would like to say that the one who is victorious would never attack commanders and would never make the Minister of Defense and the Prime Minister resign, and it would not give up upon the land it got. The last thing is that Menachem Begin in 1986 was the head of the Likud party, and he said, Sinai became a part of Israel, and in it I will have my graveyard. And he was the one who signed the peace accord in 1979. And it's for you to decide. I think that these few minutes, if all youth would listen to it, would be well prepared to answer to all the lies that they might hear. Dr. Maha, we know very well that there is good documentation inside the Egyptian armed forces for October war and victory, but more documentation and more testimonies are needed so that they would reach the coming generations, be it this generation or the next generation. What do we need to do? If we're talking or complain about attempts to tell lies and turn the defeat into a victory, so we need to document in a manner that suits the different generations and the modern technologies and the whole world. We need to be proactive rather than reactive. After 50 years of October victory, I think that we need a digital platform on which we put all videos, photos, images, testimonies, letters of soldiers, and documents, all writings, and we might have video games about the war, so it would be a digital platform that would have all the materials about October war to suit all people, and maybe it can be also in other languages for the whole world. So is it time to document this on a digital platform?
أي حاجة يعني أنا مش عايز أأجل لا بعد ما تخلصوا، لكن أي حاجة طبعا ممكن.
Anything can be done so that our awareness and the awareness of our youth would go on vivid. So we are ready to do anything for that, anything true. If we say that this is just a drop, then one of the positive things is that we have now a documentary channel. This is step one, and it will be followed by other steps. Back to you, Mr. Muhammad. And to what the Major General said, if we would look on the internet, we will find that a lot of people try to hide this, but there is the digital print that would never be hidden. But this needs effort, needs a lot of things to be done. In the meantime, we say that our young people need the things that would protect them from the lies. Last of which is a movie in cinema. In fact, Mr. Osama, it is not just limited to historical events or October victory and countries spending money to rewrite history from their perspective. It is a continuous theory. Any enemy who hates the state would use these methods according to his abilities. These methods are not just used in ordinary work, but in terrorist attacks. If there is a terrorist attack in a country, they can over-exaggerate its impact, its figures and numbers. All these methods
غسيل المعلومات ده كله على الديجيتال او السوشيال ميديا
be it misleading information, disinformation, misinformation, or information laundering. Europe even says that there are countries that intervene in the European elections, so all countries are suffering from this. They all say one thing, that we need to depend on facts. When you show the fact, when you say the fact and highlight it, it's stronger than any false news, because the truth is always stronger. And here we are celebrating October victory in different ways, through different messages. This is so important. Celebrating October war is a national duty, even if we do not want to, so that everyone would know what happened exactly in October war and would learn about our great army. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed. Mr. President.
خلوني ان انا يعني اوجه لكم الشكر.
Let me thank you all,
معالي الامين العام
Secretary General of the League of Arab States and Major General Talat, my professor, whom we appreciate for his science, his information knowledge. We are a generation who learned from him.
وانا يعني هتكلم الاول اقول الهزيمه امتى؟
When was the defeat?
الهزيمه عندما تقبلها.
The defeat happens when you accept it.
انا عايز اقول لكم ان حاله الهزيمه
Only then we will be defeated. I want to say that in 1967 there was a defeat, but the national challenge was on the 9th of June when the Egyptians took to the streets after late President Gamal Abdel Nasser decided to resign and told him no. So this was this incident was great, and it had great impacts on Egypt, the army, and the whole Arab nation. Despite that, the Egyptians took to the streets, because a lot of people say that this was arranged for. No, the Egyptians took to the streets to say we do not accept this defeat. And the army was weak, and the Israelis were in Sinai. So the first thing I would like to say, it did not start in 1973. It started after the defeat, after the strike, while people were feeling painful. Yet they got out and said we won't accept this defeat, and they endured difficult conditions since 1967 up till 1973. Of course, there was Arab support, but all Egyptian resources were allocated for the military efforts and the military preparations. And the Egyptians back then used to stand in queues to purchase their needs. So what do I mean here by awareness? I mean absence of attendance. He who lived through this is totally different from he who hears about it. So you want to tell the person who did not know that how the story was. You need to tell them the depth of the story, the amount of efforts, the persistence of the Egyptians to resist this defeat. And maybe this astonished the Israelis themselves. They expected that because of the defeat, the Egyptian president would get out of the scene. And in my opinion, I considered that one of the strengths of Egypt at that time was the character of the president. The president himself. So it was another challenge in 1970 when late President Gamal Abdel Nasser deceased. This was something very severe. The third point I would like to mention here is that we were influenced by the international circumstances, and there was a conflict between two superpowers, the US and the Soviet Union. When I tell you this right now, this generation who did not live those days cannot know what is its influence. To an extent, the destinies and fates of countries were decided according to the talks taking place between these superpowers, the Soviet Union and the US. This changed after 1990. But back then, this had an influence on building our capabilities that would enable us to continue our mission and restore our lands. Another important point. If you have lived from 1967 till 1973, you would have known that Egypt was not just victorious, but it took a stride, it took a leap. When there are two equal parties in strength and in capabilities, as well as morale, because of course the winner has higher morale than the loser. So when the power is defeated, and it was the Egyptian or the Arab at that time, and there is full destruction of the military capabilities of armies, especially the Egyptian. It was said by Musha Dayan that Egypt needs 50 years to rebuild its army that was destroyed. So those who can, in light of all these circumstances of defeat, desperation, loss of confidence, lack of the leader who was there from 1952 to 1970, and was considered to be a large part of the equation. All that and the army still can overcome this fear, lack of confidence, difference in power. Difference in power between what we had and what they had, then this is not just a victory. The US air bridge was sending M60 tanks to El Arish airport. And also making up for the Phantom fighters and El Mansoura battle and all the other battles and the erosion of the Israeli air forces. And despite all that, the Egyptian army, through planning, training, determination, the high spirit was able to achieve this victory. But if you think that there is a major US air bridge, we are not saying this to remind ourselves only, but to try to understand the story. Kissinger in his diary said that the decision was not to allow the defeat of the Western arms. Then it is a decision that was made at the level of the two superpowers.
احنا كدوله علينا
We as a state have
ودور نعمله
a role to play
ونعمله بالموضوعيه، لان احنا عايزين
objectively
دايما في تعاملنا بعد اذنكم
because
ان احنا نبقى دايما
we always
الحق دايما ما حدش يقدر يعني يتغلب عليه.
always know that honesty and truth would never be defeated. So if you want to know the story, you should not just say a word or a headline. You need to listen and read well because it's your country. If you're interested and you want to know the story.
أنا كان في الوقت ده عندي 13 سنة، سنة 67.
In 1967 I was 13 years old.
أنا فاكر كل
And I swear by God I remember everything that was done. شدوان، راس العش،
المدمرة إيلات،
إيلات،
الزيتية،
فاير، بلوزة and رمانة. Any statement that was made then
جايب جرايده وحاططها بالإضافة للي بسمعه والكتب
I kept the newspapers showing these statements and talking about all these incidents. I said this before.
مقالة واحدة من ضمن المقالات اللي اتقالت كان ضمن
There was one article that was written
كان كاتبها الكاتب
by
الراحل المفكر العظيم
late thinker and writer محمد حسنين هيكل.
كان بيتكلم فيها عن
in which he talked about the attempts of the Egyptian army to cross over and the results. I read this article. I used then to ask all the articles about the war and the conflict and Roger's initiative. If we would read this article now, although it was published 51 or 52 years ago, because it was written in 1971 or 1972, if you would read this article, you would know the leap that the Egyptian army took. I'm not over-exaggerating because I'm from the army or because I'm Egyptian. I'm saying the truth. No one else would have done that but the Egyptian army. Your Excellency the President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this is a dialogue for a duty that we all have towards our martyrs, the creators of the victory, the coming generations, the heroes. So we should not forget and we'll never forget. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you all. I would like to thank all panelists and many happy returns. May we always be proud of Egypt and our army.
فخامة الرئيس، السادة الحضور،
distinguished guests, usually I say good evening, but I say good victory and dignity. They asked me, you as an Egyptian ordinary citizen, where were you on the 6th of October 1970? I said, there is a trap in this question. Someone wants me to admit that I lived 50 years ago. And I confess that I was alive. I was at a very important point. Let me have a short introduction. I'm the daughter of a soldier, a pilot. I used to call him my father Amar Zaman, and it was true because he was for me all the meaning of chivalry, nobility, courage, honesty. He was the summary of the military institution to which he belonged. My father, Amar Zaman, died in 1965. He was a young man and I was young as well. And since then, I had a dream every day, and it will keep there till the end of my life. And it is to be in a place and find my father, Amar Zaman, coming. So I will feel happy, jump up and say, Father is here. Because Father is here has a dual meaning. He was a pilot, means that he came back with victory. And I know that this dream will never come true. But I used to think that he would be by my side. And I used to hear him. And for long hours I would keep listening to his breath, and they told me that I am crazy, but I was not crazy. I really used to hear him. And since 1967 until 1973, this breath was not happy, but was rather sad, and this was painful to me. Let's go back to the 6th of October 1973. I was at a very important place. I was in the Middle East radio station, and it was the 10th of Ramadan, so we have been showing our programs for 9 days, and I remember that we were broadcasting a film, Please Do Not Understand Me Fast, and on the 10th of October, on the 6th of October, the 10th of Ramadan at 2 p.m. in the 2 p.m. news bulletin, a military statement was made, and it shocked the whole building and the whole of Egypt, an earthquake that made everyone happy. And people started feeling that they are back, and all of a sudden people started moving around, preparing statements, and I was the most important person in the radio station on that day. Not because I am important, Omar, I well experienced, but I was the most important one because I kept running from here to there. I went to the ground floor and bring a recording machine, and then get on the 6th floor to the studio, and then I find that everyone is there, and I will find also that all the stars, Abdulhamid Hafiz, Shadia, Warda, Baligh, Hamdi, Salah, Jaheen, Al-Abnoudi, Muhammad Hamza, they all came. They all came to reflect the happiness of the soft arm, when you want to reflect the happiness of people and the victory. In all rooms, people were working, some singing and some preparing. And I kept going and coming up and down. until the fasting moment. When I looked at these people, I found that the art that they made in few hours was not done at only this moment. These have been people waiting for 6 years for this dream to come true. And these artistic works were accumulating inside themselves. That's why they got it out at this short time. And these people never lost hope, because the army and people are interconnected and interlinked. We are all sons, grandsons of each other. So they would never believe in losing hope. All time they had hope, and that's why all these artistic works were that successful. I needed to document this moment. I wanted to have this ability to document that moment, to reflect how these beautiful songs were made and how they reflected their feeling of belonging to Egypt. And at that time, I thought I want to do something for myself. So I called my mother and I told her, Father is back. His spirit is now in peace, because he saw his country victorious. I had the same feeling. On the 3rd of July 2014, I was on Abu al-Ala bridge moving towards the square, and all of a sudden the sky was full of planes that were throwing balloons, flowers, and I kept jumping, saying, Father came. I wish that all our days would be as beautiful as such, because this victory that we are celebrating today would never be outdated, and it would always make me feel that my father is back. Thank you. I would like to say one last word. We need to document, as His Excellency the President said, the next generations need to see what happened in a new way, and this is exactly what we are going to see next.
I think that we can wait for a call. I don't see anything wrong with the present situation. I don't know why should we approach anyone about anything. As far as I'm concerned, we are just happy as it is now. And if the others are happy, so that's it.
But the others aren't going to be happy, really, are they?
Let them ring us up.
On the 5th of June, 1967.
5 يونيو 67 المعروفة في تاريخنا باسم نكسة يونيو، والعدو مسميها حرب الأيام الست. تشد هيامين هيامين.
دي مش نكسة، دي نكبة عظمى.
بس احنا ما حاربناش. طياراتنا اتضربت على الأرض في مطاراتها، ومن غير حماية جوية انتهت المعركة قبل ما تبدأ. حرب 5 يونيو سنة 1967 أو حرب الأيام الستة شنت فيها إسرائيل هجوم خاطف على مصر وسوريا وفلسطين المحتلة.
اليوم ده الصبح كنا واقفين في أرض الطابور استعدادا للتوجه لجناح الطيران، وفوجئنا بالطيارات الإسرائيلية بتهاجم المطار، بتدمر طيارات التدريب اللي أنا هروح أطير عليها. منظر ظل في مخيلتي لغاية حرب 73.
70% من الممرات بتاعت الطيران احنا فقدناها، فدي كانت حقيقة صدمة كبيرة ولا تبشر بأي خير. لأن السلاح الجوي هو سيد المعركة خاصة في الصحراء.
تقريبا كان نص الجيش المصري موجود في اليمن.
احتلت إسرائيل في 67 هضبة الجولان السورية وغزة والضفة الغربية في فلسطين والقدس الشرقية اللي كانت تحت الحماية الأردنية وقتها. وفي مصر احتلت إسرائيل شبه جزيرة سيناء وتم إغلاق قناة السويس أمام الملاحة العالمية.
في الفترة دي كان ما عندناش عتاد عسكري. في المقابل ده أول مرة كنا نرى القوات الإسرائيلية في الناحية التانية، دبابات وأتوبيسات تجيب وفود سياحية وينزلوا يستحموا في قناة السويس.
ظلمنا في هذا الحرب.
السماء حزين، الأرض حزين.
The history of Israel reborn.
Nasser knows that even now Israel is much, much stronger than his forces. Just to wait and see.
بعد 56 وبعد 48 هيبقى ايه من البلد؟
احنا حسينا بالمهانة، ويمكن في تمثيليات او حاجات كده ورت ايه كانت شعور الضباط والجنود ايه.
جرى يا دق بتنسحب ليه؟ سيبه ما هو اتمرن على الانسحاب.
كون اي حد يقدم لكليات عسكريه مش مطلوب.
الارض عرض، كانت الروح كلها يا اما معركة تنتصر فيها يا اما الشهادة.
ما أخذ بالقوة لا يمكن أن يسترد بغير القوة.
قادرون بعد التحذير أن نوجه الضربة بعد الضربة.
ما أخذ بالقوة لا يمكن أن يسترد بغير القوة.
جدي الله يرحمه اللواء فؤاد ياسين كان ضابط في القوات المسلحة في 67 وحكى لنا قصص كتير جدا عن الأهوال اللي شافوها. فكنت دايما بسأله، بكل اللي شفتوه ده برضه بتقولوا عليها نكسة مش هزيمة؟ كان يرد عليا بمنتهى الإصرار، عشان هي نكسة مش هزيمة.
بابا، ايه كان واقع صدمة النكسة على حضرتك؟
حسب ما كان بيتقال لنا ايامها، فاحنا كنا متوقعين انتصار مبهر على اسرائيل. ده بتقلب لك موازين تفكير الواحد، بيحس بصدمة عنيفة جدا، بيحس بعدم الثقة في حاجات كتيرة قوي. بداية حرب الاستنزاف بدأت الناس تسترد نوع من الثقة في المؤسسة العسكرية في هذا الوقت، وهي بيعاد تشكيلها وبيعاد بنائها، وبدأ يتحط إيد في الإيد المدني مع العسكري.
تجميع القوات حصل على طول من يوم 10 يونيو، يعني في خلال 3 أيام، ويوم 1 يوليو يعني في أقل من شهر عن النكسة. بدأت قوات الصاعقة المصرية عملياتها العسكرية في سيناء واستمرت بدون توقف لحد سنة 1970. كلفت العدو خسائر رهيبة. بالبلدي ما سيبناهمش يتهنوا يوم بالنصر. من أول 67 وطول حرب الاستنزاف وبعدها كان العبور للضفة الثانية من القنال عمل فدائي ما يقدرش عليه غير الكوماندوز المصريين. قريب من هنا دارت أول معارك حرب الاستنزاف، معركة راس العش اللي اتفاجئ فيها العدو بالقدرات القتالية الحقيقية لقوات الصاعقة المصرية.
حرب الاستنزاف ابتدت بمعركة راس العش لما حاولت القوات الإسرائيلية مهاجمة مدينة بور فؤاد بقلة، عملت خسائر للقوات دي المتفوقة عليها وأجبرتها على الانسحاب.
انتصار الصاعقة المصرية في معركة راس العش كان السبب في ان بور فؤاد كانت المنطقة الوحيدة في سيناء اللي فضلت تحت السيادة المصرية طول ال6 سنين ما بين 67 وحرب 73. والأهم إنها رفعت الروح المعنوية للقوات المسلحة ورجعت لنا جزء من الثقة وفتحت نفسنا على عمليات كتير بعدها. إغراق أكبر قطعة بحرية للعدو المدمرة إيلات.
هو إيلات فيه 2 إيلات، فيه المدمرة إيلات اللي اتضربت بلانشات الصواريخ يوم 21 أكتوبر 67، وفي ميناء إيلات اللي هو يقع في خليج العقبة أمام مدينة العقبة الأردنية وجنب طابة المصرية. يكفي فخرا للضفادع البشرية المصرية أن تم مهاجمة ميناء إيلات الإسرائيلي 5 مرات في خلال 7 أشهر.
ومن قلب بطولات الصاعقة المصرية في حرب الاستنزاف اتولدت أسطورة العميد إبراهيم الرفاعي والمجموعة 39 قتال. أول العمليات الفدائية بقيادة العميد إبراهيم الرفاعي كانت نسف تشوينات أسلحة وبقايا مركبات ودبابات خاصة بالجيش المصري كان العدو بيستعد لنقلها لعرضها في معرض تل أبيب احتفالا بالنصر.
إبراهيم الرفاعي خد مجموعة من الضباط وعدوا حطوا قنابل
المتفجرات، ولعوا المنطقة كلها، ولعوا الذخائر والأسلحة واللي كانوا عدو مشونها عشان يدخلها في داخل إسرائيل.
ورفض إبراهيم الرفاعي وأبطال الصاعقة إن يسيبوا العدو ياخد اللقطة.
الشهيد البطل عبد المنعم رياض استشهد يوم 9 مارس سنة 69. كان لابد إن احنا ننتقم له. يوم ال40 بتاعه إبراهيم الرفاعي طلب رفع ضرب المدفعية، بدأنا نهاجم الموقع، ولعنا المنطقة الإدارية في المنتصف، أنزلنا العلم الإسرائيلي، رفعنا العلم المصري، قضينا على قوة الموقع كاملا.
حرب الاستنزاف كان ليها ثمن، والثمن كان غالي.
في 8 من أبريل عام 1970 أغارت الطائرات الإسرائيلية من طراز فانتوم على مدرسة أطفال بحر البقر الابتدائية بمنطقة الصالح.
8 إبريل 1970 شنت قوات العدو غارة جوية بطيارات الفانتوم على مدرسة ابتدائية مشتركة في قرية بحر البقر مركز الحسينية محافظة الشرقية. استشهد فيها 30 طفل وطفلة واتصاب 50 غير 11 من العاملين والمدرسين.
كان من المرحله دي الطيران الاسرائيلي بيضرب بحر البقر وبيضرب نجا حمادي، فانت عشان ما عندكش طيران يوجعه زي طيران.
تعرضنا لغارات اسرائيليه في العمق، ثم ضرب مدارس الاطفال زي ما ضربوا مدرسه بحر البقر.
المدرسه لما انضربت انا كنت في تانية ابتدائي، سمعنا صوت طيران، بس صوت طيران غريب مش متعودين عليه. لما حصل القذف اغمى عليا خالص، ما اعرفش انا فين. فوجئت بعد 3 شهور انني في المستشفى.
ساعة القذف وساعة زمايلي ما شفتوه جنبي، انا عمري ما انسى مدى الحياة، بقى وقت 53 سنة ما بنسى اللحظة دي.
والدي ما عرفنيش اصلا لسبب ان هم كانوا بودرة النبال حرجانة، حتى الاصابة مش كان محروقة، كله اسمر. بعد ما طبت بالعلاج رحت اشوف المدرسة، التقيت ما فيش مدرسة، واقعة كلها في الارض، الفصول كلها واقعة.
بعد مذبحة مدرسة بحر البقر بدأت مصر في إنشاء حائط الصواريخ سنة 70. أول حائط صواريخ ليها.
حائط الصواريخ كان بيبنى على الأرض قواعد صواريخ محصنة حتى يمكن كسر الذراع الطويلة للعدو في هذا التوقيت.
السماء بتاعتك ومجالك الجوي منتهك يوميا.
الحائط ده كان عبارة عن نظام دفاع جوي بيحمي عمق مصر من الغارات الإسرائيلية. ومن أهم إنجازات حائط الصواريخ عملية اتعرفت باسم أسبوع تساقط الفانتوم.
اتفاجئت القوات الجوية الإسرائيلية في أحد الهجمات الجوية بعد ما دخلت لها الطيارة الفانتوم الحديثة بإسقاط 2 طيارة فانتوم.
ونجحنا في خلال الأسبوع ده اللي بدأ في 30 يونيو لحد 7 يوليو 1970 في إسقاط عدد كبير من طيارات الفانتوم وسكاي هوك، وأصابنا 3 طيارين إسرائيليين. كانوا صيد ثمين وانتقمنا لأطفالنا وأهلنا في بحر البقر. لما الدخل قل كان في أكيد تغييرات حصلت، يعني كان إزاي ده ليه وقع عليكم كمستوى اجتماعي؟
اقتصاديا اتأثرنا جدا، لأن الموارد المتاحة من خلال دخل والدي من الجيش قلت بداعي المشاركة في المجهود الحربي، وبالتالي بقى في كنترول وفي الصرف بقى محدود جدا.
أول اجتماع لينا عائلي على ترابيزة السفرة، بابا جمعنا ويا جماعة احنا دلوقتي الدخل بتاعنا قل جدا مش زي الأول، ده اللي موجود ولازم نمشي عليه.
اللي حققناه في ال3 سنين من 67 ل 70 رد فينا الروح وخلى الأمل جوانا صاحي إن يوم الحساب قرب ومعركة الفصل جاية. لكن القدر كان مخبي لنا ضربة موجعة.
فقدت الجمهورية العربية المتحدة وفقدت الإنسانية كلها رجلا من أغنى الرجال وأشجع الرجال وأخلص الرجال هو الرئيس جمال عبد الناصر.
الشك حل محل الأمل والإحباط رجع سيطر على المشهد، والهدف اللي كان قرب قوي بعد قوي.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أحافظ مخلصا على النظام الجمهوري وأن أحترم الدستور والقانون وأن أرعى مصالح الشعب وسلامة أراضيه.
الرئيس السادات التزم بمبادرة روجرز الأمريكية لوقف إطلاق النار، ويبقى الوضع على ما هو عليه. احنا كمصريين في الاجازه بتاعت 6 اكتوبر بنحب نروح شرم الشيخ. شمسها خريفي دافيه، مفيش رطوبه، البحر حلو وهادي. وده بالظبط اللي الاسرائيليين كانوا بيعملوه في عفيره. اهلا بيكم في عفيره. عفيره هو الاسم اللي اطلقه المحتل على شرم الشيخ، وهو اسم من الكتاب المقدس، معناه الارض المليئه بالذهب والخير. اسسوا فيها اكبر قاعده جويه ليهم في سيناء. شموا نفسهم بعد مبادره روجرز، وزادت طاقتهم في ان السادات اكيد مش هيحارب.
وهكذا فإنني في الشهور الماضية وضعت أمامي الأولويات الثلاث التالية: أولاً إطلاق كل القوى الكامنة في الجهاز التنفيذي، ثانياً ترتيب أوضاع قواتنا المسلحة، ثالثاً تعبئة كل إمكانيات التنظيم السياسي.
وبالرغم ان الرئيس السادات كان بيأكد في تصريحاته ان الحرب جايه، الا ان القيادات الاسرائيليه والمخابرات الامريكيه اعتبروا تصريحاته مجرد كلام يهدي بيه الشارع المصري اللي كان فاض بيه وعايز يدخل يحارب واللي يحصل يحصل.
I thought of Sadat as a character out of Aida. I didn't take him seriously. He kept making grandiloquent pronouncements and never acted on them. So I frankly thought he was bluffing.
The motherland, if it is sand, mud, or marshes, or whatever it is the motherland.
No one will capitulate here in this country. I'm not ready to capitulate.
محمد أنور السادات، الرئيس الثالث لجمهورية مصر العربية، اشتهر بالدهاء وقدرته على المناورة وإخفاء نواياه. ويعتبر واحد من أبرز القادة السياسيين والعسكريين على الساحة الدولية خلال القرن العشرين. وصلنا لسنة 1973 وبدأ الأمر وكأن المعركة ما بقتش مسيطرة على دماغ المصريين، كأن الحياة مكملة عادي. الفترة اللي قضاها الرئيس السادات من حياته في العمل الثوري لمقاومة الاحتلال علمته مهارات أساسية كانت البذرة اللي بنى عليها خطة الخداع الاستراتيجي. ويمكن ده سر عبقريته، إنه أخفى نواياه الحقيقية عن طريق إنه بينها وأعلنها في نفس الوقت، بس هم ما صدقوش. في 73 السادات طلب من كل الصحف القومية إنها تنزل خبر في الصفحة الأولى عن بعثات عمرة للجيش، بس هم ما راحوش. كانت كل حاجة بتحصل تحت سمع وبصر العدو ومخابراته، وطبعا المخابرات الأمريكية، بس برضه فضلوا مش مصدقين.
But the most significant and probably the most skillful thing that the Egyptians engaged in was a very, very sophisticated misinformation or disinformation campaign.
لو رجعنا الحقائق والأرقام ممكن فعلا نلتمس لهم العذر في استبعاد الحرب.
خطة الخداع ما اتعملتش على مستوى القوات المسلحة، اتعملت على مستوى الرئيس السادات، على الوزارات، الهيئات، قوات مسلحة. إسرائيل بتعتمد على قوات الاحتياط أساساً، أكبر قوات احتياط نسبة مئوية في العالم. كانت أهم نقطة إن أنا أكسر خطة التعبئة.
ليه كان كل فترة هنحارب ومفيش حرب.
إنك تعمل تدريب كل سنة، وبعدين تيجي في واحدة منهم תقلبها حرب.
אני זוכר דיין מדווח לממשלה ואומר, אנחנו לא נוכל לחיות כך שאנחנו כל יום חמישי ושישי לאור כל ידיעה מודיעינית נצטרך לגייס את הצבא, זה עולה כסף, זה משתק את המשק. מה עוד שהקונספציה היא שכל הנתונים מצביעים על כך שאיננה צפויה מלחמה.
ومن ضمن خطته إن قبل الحرب بيوم، يوم 5 أكتوبر، بعت السادات وزير الخارجية محمد الزيات لمقابلة هنري كيسنجر وزير الخارجية الأمريكي، وساب اللي عايز يقول حاجة يقولها. السادات كان قاصد يغذي إحساس إن إحنا مش هنحارب، لكن الحقيقة إن الاستعدادات جوه صفوف الجيش للحرب كانت واصلة للذروة.
توجيه 41 فريق الشاذلي كان هو اللي بيتكلم على تفاصيل الجندي في مرحلة العبور والمهمات القتال.
كان بيدينا دفاتر كده فيها كل حاجة من أول العسكري ما يعملها أو الضابط أو القائد يعملها في قبل الميدان، قبل الحرب وأثناء الحرب وبعد الحرب.
هل قدرت مصر في 6 سنين تبني جيش قوي ومدرب ومحترف؟ هل قدرت تجيب السلاح اللازم؟ هل عندنا طيران قوي كفاية؟ طب هنعبر القناة ازاي؟ طب الدبابات والمدرعات هتعبر القناة ازاي؟ هنعدي الساتر الترابي ازاي؟ ولو عديناه هنعدي حصول خط مريف ازاي؟ بعد انتصارها في الحرب سنة 67 بنت إسرائيل سلسلة من التحصينات الدفاعية على طول الضفة الشرقية لقناة السويس بطول 170 كيلومتر باسم خط بارليف. بتبدأ تحصينات خط بارليف بساتر ترابي بارتفاع من 20 ل 22 متر بزاوية ميل ما بين 60 ل 70 درجة، صعب التسلق للأفراد والمعدات العسكرية. بيمتد عمقه لحد 12 كيلومتر داخل أراضي سيناء. بيضم 32 نقطة حصينة بتبعد كل منها حوالي 10 ل 12 كيلومتر عن التانية. تضم كل نقطة فيهم أفراد مقاتلة ومدافع ومساطب للدبابات. تم تحصين النقاط الدفاعية بالأسمنت المسلح والكتل الخرسانية وقضبان السكك الحديد للحماية من كل أنواع القصف. تضم كل نقطة عدد من الدشم للرشاشات وملاجئ للأفراد ودشم للأسلحة المضادة للدبابات والهونات وأسلاك شائكة. كل نقطة دفاعية بتتكون من عدد أدوار تحت الأرض مربوطة ببعضها بخنادق عميقة. ترتبط كل النقاط الدفاعية بشبكة اتصالات سلكية ولا سلكية مربوطة بشبكة التليفونات المدنية بإسرائيل. ومن كل نقطة حصينة تمتد شبكة أنابيب واصلة لمياه قناة السويس مجهزة لإلقاء النابالم الحارق وإشعال سطح القناة في حالة قيام القوات المصرية بمحاولة العبور. كل تفصيلة في حرب أكتوبر وراها فكر وإبداع وعلم وعبقرية. يمكن أهم تفصيلة عبقرية في الحرب ميعادها. يوم كيبور أو عيد الغفران هو أكتر يوم مقدس في السنة العبرية. هو اليوم العاشر من أيام التوبة في العقيدة اليهودية، وفيه محرم على اليهود الانشغال بأي عمل دنيوي. بيتفرغوا للصيام والعبادة لمدة 25 ساعة بتبدأ من غروب يوم التاسع وتنتهي مع غروب اليوم العاشر من شهر تشريع حسب التقويم العبري. يوم 6 أكتوبر الصبح عقد الموساد اجتماع طارئ لمناقشة احتمالية قيام الحرب، والنتيجة اللي وصلوا لها إن الحرب مستبعدة. 6 أكتوبر 1973 العاشر من رمضان في التقويم الهجري والدنيا صيام. 10 تشريع في التقويم العبري والدنيا برضه صيام الساعة 2 الظهر. في شوية حركة على الجبهة المصرية غرب القنال والجبهة السورية في هضبة الجولان، بس مفيش حاجة تقلق لأبسط سبب، إن مفيش حرب بتقوم الساعة 2 بعد الظهر. طائرتنا اتضربت على الأرض.
عندما أتنحى تماما لا يمكن أن يسترد غير
انتهت المعركة قبل ما تبدأ، بس الحرب قامت الساعة 2 الظهر. خطة الحرب كانت كالآتي: تبدأ القوات الجوية بتوجيه ضربة جوية شاملة ومركزة ضربت حوالي 64 هدف للعدو في عمق سيناء ما بين قيادة وتجميع احتياطي.
والضربة دي عملت نتائج أكتر من 95% ب 220 طيار فيها قاذفات. مقاتلات القذف ال 117 ضربت قواعد الصواريخ اللي كانت موجودة.
وبدأت قوات المدفعية الضرب بأكتر من 2000 مدفع متوزعة على طول خط القنال. ركزت على دك خط بارليف، وفي نفس الوقت أطلقت صواريخ بعيدة المدى تشل وتدمر الأهداف في مطارات سيناء ومراكز القيادة. ومش بس على جبهة واحدة، على جبهتين. الجيش المصري شن هجومه عند قناة السويس في مصر، والجيش السوري بدأ الهجوم من هضبة الجولان في سوريا.
هنا القاهرة نجحت قواتنا المسلحة في عبور قناة السويس على طول المواجهة، ورفع علم مصر.
مرور الطائرات فوق رؤوس الناس خلى الناس تصيح
في وقت واحد. الله اكبر،
مفيش حد فينا بقى نقطع غير ايه؟ الله اكبر، ما كانش مخطط.
ده قناه السويس دي مانع مائي من الصعب عبوره حتى في وقت السلم.
الحبل البحاري اللي هو عباره عن حبال وعرض خشب اللي عملته هيئه قناه السويس، انت بتطلع فوق تروح داقق زاويه كبيره وتشبك فيها وتنزله لتحت. اليوم اللي طالع بدل ما يطلع في الرمله المتهالة يطلع على السلم ده. ممكن تحط مسلمين جنب بعض وتجر عليه مدفع له عجلين.
المدافع الصغيره وزنها 82 كيلو، العساكر شالوها على كتافهم وطلعوا بقى الساتر.
توجيه 41 من ضمن ما يتكلم على شده الجندي. هي عباره عن جاكيته مليانه بيوت، فيها الذخيره وفيها القنابل وفيها اكل وشرب وبطانيه صغيره.
معدات 50 كيلو، 3 خزن ذخيره وموت وقايه وميه واكل 3 ايام جف. وزن المدفع 305 كيلو. بعد سنه جبت 20 جندي ورحت عشان اطلع المدفع ما طلعش.
ازاي الانسان يقدر يشيل الشيله دي؟ في الوضع العادي ما يقدرش، لكن في وقت الحرب وقت الحماس
الناس راحت على الطيارات جهزت، دخلوا على الممر، الطيارات طلعت، الناس مستنيه انه هيتقال روحوا على ميدان ضرب النار. بعض الناس اللي موجوده ما صدقتش غير لما عدوا قناه السويس، عرفوا ان دي الحرب.
نجحت قواتنا في اقتحام قناه السويس واستولت على نقاط العدو القويه فيها، واترفع علم مصر على الضفه الشرقيه للقناه.
وصلنا الضفه الغربيه قناه السويس لقينا العلم المصري مغروس في الضفه الشرقيه بكثافه.
لما وصلنا بقى الناحيه الثانيه لقيت السطر الترابي عالي جدا، اعمل ايه؟ فطلعت جري بالعلم وحطيته فوق وشاء الله اكبر.
وبعد ما تم السيطره على حصون خط بارليف قامت القوات بفتح ثغر الساتر الترابي. الفكره العبقريه باستخدام خراطيم المياه لفتح ثغرات في الساتر الترابي كانت فكره اللواء اركان حرب المهندس باقي زكي يوسف. وجات له الفكره بالوحي لما كان منتدب للعمل في موقع بناء للسد العالي. عند الثغرات اللي فتحناها في الساتر الترابي هنركب الكباري، ومن فوق الكباري هتعبر المدرعات والمركبات والتدابات، وتتقدم قوات الجيشين الثاني والثالث الميداني بعمق 12 ل 15 كيلو داخل سيناء. والكباري اللي عبرت عليها الدبابات والمدرعات جبناها من المانيا عن طريق بعثه مهندسين وفنيين مدنيين قالوا ان احنا هنستخدمها في مشروعات تنمويه على ضفاف النيل.
الخط الجبار اللي هم عاملين بيه الدعايه الرهيبه دي والنار من تحت الميه ومش عارف ايه الدشم الحصينه الجباره دي، شوفوا تبت الشجره عامله ازاي.
النقطه اللي احنا واقفين فيها دي اسمها حصن تبت الشجره. الحصن ده كان مهم جدا وحيوي لانه بيسيطر على 50% من خط بارليف، مجهز للاعاشه بالكامل تحت الارض. دي بقى الدشمه من جوه، ودي كانت مقر القياده اللي بيحرك كل العمليات. كل حاجه اتثابت زي ما هي عشان تبقى متحف يحكي الاجيال عن البطولات اللي حصلت. ودي الفتحات اللي كانوا عاملينها عشان يهربوا منها، اللي احنا استغليناها عشان نرمي منها قنابل الدخان. مصمم بشكل هندسي ذكي ومميز، لان اولا الطيران ما يقدرش يكشفه لطبيعته، ثانيا لو اتضرب عليه وكشفه الاحجار دي مع الاسلاك الشائكه كل ما تتضرب تقرب من بعض اكتر وتقوى اكتر. ده الحصن الاداري، كانوا بياكلوا ويناموا ويتعالجوا فيه، مكيف بالكامل ومهيأ لمواجهه اي حصار. هم كانوا عاملين حسابهم ان هم مطولين، غير انه مصمم للدفاع الدائري من كل الاتجاهات. يعني من الاخر حصن منيع استحاله الاستحواذ عليه. 8 اكتوبر ثالث يوم الحرب القوات المصريه سيطرت عليه في ساعتين بس. طب ايه اللي منع اسرائيل تضخ النابالم في القناه وتولع الدنيا؟ الاجابه عند ابطال الضفادع البشريه المصريه.
بالابحاث وبالعلم قدروا يكونوا ماده، الماده دي فعلا عملوا عليها اختبارات وخلوا الضفادع البشريه بتاعتنا قفلت مواسير النابالم.
يعني احنا بنعبر وعارفين ان ده ممكن تتفتح علينا، ما انها اتقفلت.
بالتالي لولا سد مواسير النابالم دي كان في هتبقى خسائر كبيره قوي في العبور.
بعد هزيمه ب6 ايام واحتلال واستعداد المعركه دام 6 سنين، حصن خط بارليف المنيع مع اسطوره الجيش الذي لا يقهر انهارت امام هجوم الجيش المصري يوم 6 اكتوبر 73 زي ما قال الرئيس السادات.
في 6 ساعات
בסמוך לשעה 2 אחרי הצהריים, פתחו צבאות מצרים וסוריה בהתקפה נגד ישראל.
נעמוד בדומייה ונעלה לדאבון לב את זכרם של מאות לוחמינו, גיבורי החיל, שנספו במערכה הכבדה.
המלחמה הזאת קשה, התנגשויות חריפות ומרירות, שריון ואוויר. מלחמה כבדת ימים, כבדת דמים.
بحلول اليوم الرابع للحرب كانت قواتنا حققت المهمة المباشرة للعملية العسكرية وتوغلت لمسافة ما بين 12 كيلو ل 15 كيلومتر في عمق سيناء، وأنشأت 5 رؤوس كباري للفرق الخمسة العظام، وسيطرت على الأمور سيطرة كاملة. عاش العدو أسوأ أيامه وأكبر صدمة ليه من بداية قيام دولته.
This is not the army of 67.
Well, maybe the most terrible night ever seen.
جولدا مائير رئيسة الوزراء الإسرائيلية وصفت الأيام الأولى لحرب أكتوبر في مذكراتها بالكابوس. وبطبيعة الحال توجهت جولدا مائير للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية تستنجد بالرئيس نيكسون لإنقاذ إسرائيل. الولايات المتحدة تدخلت بالفعل لقلب موازين المعركة، فيما عرف إعلاميا عندنا بجسر الإمدادات الجوي الأمريكي، لكن في الولايات المتحدة نفسها كانت معروفة بعملية عسكرية ضخمة اسمها أوبريشن نيكل جراس أو عملية عشب النيكل. هي جسر إمداد جوي قامت بيه الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية بعد خسائر إسرائيل في يوم الاثنين الحزين لتعويض الجيش الإسرائيلي خسائره من الأسلحة والمعدات في الأيام الأولى لحرب أكتوبر 73. وكان ديفيد إليعازر رئيس أركان الجيش الإسرائيلي بيلح في طلب الإمدادات الأمريكية من يوم 8 أكتوبر، وبيطلب من القيادات الإسرائيلية إنها تشرح لأمريكا قد إيه الصورة قاتمة. تحت إلحاح جولدا مائير وضغط اللوبي اليهودي داخل أروقة السياسة الأمريكية بدأت العملية اللي أسفرت عن نقل أكثر من 22,000 طن من الأسلحة والمعدات والدبابات والذخيرة مباشرة من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية إلى أرض المعركة. أدت عملية عشب النيكل والتدخل الأمريكي الصريح لقيام الدول العربية المصدرة للبترول أعضاء منظمة الأوبك بوقف إمدادات البترول للولايات المتحدة وحلفائها، مما أدى لأزمة النفط العالمية سنة 1973 وتغيير السياسة الخارجية الأمريكية في التعامل مع الدول النفطية لحد الوقت الراهن.
America launched Operation Nickel Glass. It provided Israel with tanks, with artillery, with munitions, and all the other supplies that were needed to continue the defense of the homeland.
Describes what happened when President Nixon took Golda Meir's call in the middle of the night.
And I heard Golda Meir pleading with me, Mr. President, if you don't help us, the Jewish people will never survive.
تدخل الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية في الحرب رجع إسرائيل للمعركة بعد ما كانت باعتراف قادتها على حافة الفناء. في 14 أكتوبر دارت معركة المنصورة. كانت واحدة من أطول المعارك الجوية في تاريخ الحروب.
القوات الجوية المصرية عاملة سيطرة تكتيكية على مسرح العمليات. أنا عايز أقول المعركة دي قعدت 53 دقيقة، نتيجتها 18 طيارة إسرائيلية تم إسقاطها، والخسائر بتاعتنا لا تذكر في وسط هذا الحجم ل 53 دقيقة، وسمي بعيد القوات الجوية لأنه عيد أثبت كفاءة الطيار.
أول حاجة عملتها إسرائيل بعد ما التقطت أنفاسها إنها زودت الضغط على القوات السورية اللي كانت تستولد تقريباً على هضبة الجولان بالكامل. هنا أصدر الرئيس السادات الأوامر بتطوير الهجوم وتقدم الجيش الثاني الميداني لتخفيف الضغط على الجبهة السورية. طيارة استطلاع أمريكية بتطير على ارتفاع شاهق وبسرعة تفوق سرعة الصوت رصدت الثغرة اللي حصلت بين الجيشين الثاني والثالث، وبلغت القوات الإسرائيلية اللي بدأت تتقدم باتجاه الثغرة لعبور قناة السويس باتجاه مصر. يعني أمريكا اكتشفت الثغرة وإسرائيل دخلتها، بس ما عرفتش لا تتقدم ولا تنسحب منها.
كلمة الثغرة يعني شيء بين شيئين، اللي هو الفاصل بين الجيشين الميدانيين. المنطقة دي ما كانتش فيها قوات كافية. المنطقة دي هو رصدها لما القوات الاحتياط بتاعتنا عبروا قبل كده، بقى ظهر القوات ما فيهوش احتياطي كبير.
ويوم 15 أكتوبر دارت واحدة من أكبر معارك الدبابات في التاريخ بعد الحرب العالمية الثانية.
ده موقع من المواقع اللي موجود شرق الإسماعيلية. استشهد هنا بكتاب كتبه الإسرائيليين اسمه كتاب عيد الغفران. وعندما حل يوم 16 أكتوبر كانت المعركة ما زالت مستمرة، فقد تعثرت القوة الإسرائيلية التي بدأت منذ 48 ساعة تهاجم الموقع ومنيت بخسائر فادحة. وعندئذ تقرر اللجوء لوحدات المشاة والمظليين للقضاء على التحصينات المضادة للدبابات اللي هي تحصيناتنا احنا.
فبدأت العساكر تعمل حاجة اسمها ايه؟ اقتناص الدبابات، اتدربوا عليها. عسكري راقد كده في الظل محدش شايفه، تيجي الدبابة جنبه يروح ناطط ورمي القنبلة النووية وقافل لغطها. خلاص اللي جوه مات.
جابوا الكتيبة 890 مظليين، وبفضل الله وبطولة الأبطال المصريين قتل يجي 250 من الكوماندوز الإسرائيلي اللي هو المظليين.
القتال استمر يوم 24 لغايه بالليل، وخرجوا وسابوا معظم دباباتهم. ليه ما كترتش قواتك وهاجمت السويس مره ثانيه؟ لانك ما تقدرش، قوتك الدافعه ما تقدرش، كميه خسائرك في الثغره ما تقدرش.
If they have enough forces in the western bank, why didn't they went to Cairo?
حاول يروح الاسماعيليه فشل.
اتدمروا بالكامل.
Why didn't they take Suez? Why didn't they take إسماعيلية؟
حاول يتحرك في اتجاه السويس.
وقوات الدفاع الشعبي بتاع السويس دمرت العدو ولم يتمكن من دخول السويس.
اللي اشترك فيها المقاومة الشعبية
وقفوا ما قدروش يتحركوا من كتر المقاومة،
ودمروا معظم الدبابات والمركبات اللي حاولت تدخل مدينة السويس.
وفي يوم 19 أكتوبر تم تكليف العميد إبراهيم الرفاعي والمجموعة 39 قتال بالتصدي لهجوم العدو على مدينة الإسماعيلية.
إبراهيم الرفاعي خد مدفع 57 ومدفع RPG 7، وطلع فوق القاعدة من فوق واحنا تحت القاعدة من تحت. إبراهيم الرفاعي بيضرب من فوق، فاكتشفوه الإسرائيليين، ضربوا عليه، جات له إصابة مباشرة في القلب، والجمعة بتقول الله أكبر، سقط الشهيد البطل إبراهيم الرفاعي شهيدا في هذا اليوم.
ولما اتجوز ماما اخواتها 4 كانوا ضباط، ولما جه يتجوزها قال لها انا هعيش 10 سنين بس، احتمال يحصل كده بس ما كانش هو فعلا عاش 10 سنين ونص.
كان بيخلينا كل سنه احتفال بحاجه معينه، نقعد احنا الاثنين جنبه، نشغل الريكوردر القديم اللي بشرايط، يسجل لنا.
اسمك ايه؟
ليلى.
ليلى ايه؟
ابراهيم الرفاعي.
مدرسة ايه؟
خليفة الرؤوس الخاص.
سنة ايه؟
تالتة أول.
هو بيوثق حاجات انه انا حضرت معاكم، الحاجات دي مستمره.
ادعى العدو ان السويس احتلت. هل احتلت السويس؟
لم يتمكن العدو من احتلال السويس، ودمر جميع دباباته التي حاولت دخول السويس.
دفع ثمن غالي غالي.
24 أكتوبر مصر وإسرائيل وافقوا على وقف إطلاق النار. إسرائيل كسرت الاتفاق ده كذا مرة، لكنها في الآخر أدركت إن عمرها ما تحقق النصر اللي نفسها فيه. على الجانب الآخر مصر قررت إن هي حققت أهدافها العسكرية، وأجبرت العدو إنه يرضخ ويطلب المفاوضات. وفي قلب خيمة في وسط الصحراء انعقدت أول مفاوضات مباشرة بين مصر وإسرائيل، وتم الاتفاق على الهدنة وتبادل الأسرى. بعتت القيادة لأهالي السويس تسألهم طلباتهم إيه، وكان ردهم ما تشيلوش همنا، إحنا على وضعنا، اتفاوضوا على اللي فيه مصلحة مصر. الحقيقة إن العبرة في الحروب بالخواتيم. في سابقة تاريخية مصر حاربت بنفسها واستعادت أرضها. سيناء اللي كانت محتلة رجع كل شبر منها للسيادة المصرية، والطرف الثاني اللي كان متغطرس ومستبعد أي عملية عسكرية ملا الدنيا صياح، وجري يستنجد بالحلفاء وهو بيصرخ انقذوا إسرائيل.
ما كناش نتوقع إن إحنا بعد مرور 50 سنة من حرب أكتوبر إن إحنا نكون موجودين في هذا المكان، ولا كنا حتى بنتوقع قبل حرب أكتوبر إن إحنا نبقى موجود في هذا المكان.
سنة 1977 فاجئ الرئيس السادات العالم وخد زمام المبادرة وزار إسرائيل كأول خطوة مهدت لمعاهدة السلام.
املأوا الأرض والفضاء بتسابيح السلام، املأوا الصدور والقلوب بآمال السلام، اجعلوا الأنشودة حقيقة تعيش وتثمر.
فاكرة لما كنت بتتضايقي مننا إن إحنا ما رحناش النصب تذكاري وأنت مسافرة عشان نقرا الفاتحة هناك للشهداء؟
كل واحد ياخد له وردة من مصروفه ونطلع على النصب التذكاري في مدينة نصر، وانتوا صغيرين مش عارفين بس انتوا رايحين فين؟ الناس دي ماما بتحبهم، احنا رايحين نقرا لهم الفاتحة.
في مارس 1979 وقعت مصر وإسرائيل معاهدة السلام الدائم اللي بموجبها ردت إسرائيل كل الأراضي اللي احتلتها في 67. وفي سنة 1982 انسحبت إسرائيل بالدموع من سيناء، ووفيرة رجع اسمها شرم الشيخ، وتحولت تحت السيادة المصرية من مستوطنة وقاعدة جوية لمدينة رسمية للسلام العالمي.
according to Jewish law, it is forbidden to give up 1 centimeter of this land. We are not prepared to give it up. If we are found
Will you invite Prime Minister Begin to come to Cairo?
Really, I'm planning to invite him to Sinai.
Thank you, sir. To who?
Sinai.
إسرائيل حاولت تتحايل على اتفاقية وقالت طابة مش بتاعتكم دي بتاعتنا، ولجأت فيها مصر للتحكيم الدولي، وشكلت فريق من الخبراء خاضوا معركة على مدار 10 سنين عشان يرجعوا طابة لحضن مصر. وفي مارس 1989 كسبت مصر التحكيم وتم رفع العلم المصري على طابة.
ولن ينتكس علم مصر أبدا.
واستردت مصر أرضها وكبريائها ومكانتها الإقليمية والدولية. كل ده بفضل القوة اللي أظهرتها في أكتوبر 73 وكسبت بيها احترام العالم كله. النهاردة بعد مرور 50 سنة على حرب أكتوبر نقدر نقول إنها حجر الأساس لكل اللي جه بعدها. حددت شكل وملامح وشخصية القوات المسلحة المصرية الحديثة، وبقت العقيدة والدستور اللي العسكرية المصرية ما بتحيدش عنهم: الدفاع عن مصر وحفظ استقرارها وأمنها والانحياز دايما لشعبها. في يناير 2011 مطالب الشعب كانت مشروعة والجيش انحاز لها وعدى بالبلاد من ظرف تاريخي صعب ونفذ كل مطالب الشعب. وفي 30 يونيو 2013 استنجد المصريين بجيشهم والجيش كعادته كان في الميعاد ولبى النداء:
تعطيل العمل بالدستور بشكل مؤقت.
وأنقذ مصر من شبح حرب أهلية وهلاك محقق.
أقسم بالله العظيم أن أحافظ مخلصاً على النظام الجمهوري وأن أحترم الدستور والقانون.
وبدأت مصر عهد جديد عايزة تعوض فيه الوقت اللي فاتها وتبني دولة حديثة قوية، ولقت نفسها قدام تحدي هو الأصعب. الجيش المصري خاض معركة شرسة وطويلة ضد الإرهاب في سيناء، وبالتوازي شارك بدور أساسي مع كل أطياف الشعب المصري في التنمية وبناء الجمهورية الجديدة. وكل ده ما كانش ممكن يحصل لو ما كانتش روح أكتوبر لسه عايشة معانا. والنهارده لما وقفنا إيد واحدة قدرنا في وسط كل التحديات نقف على رجلينا ونبني بلدنا. وطول ما احنا عايشين بروح أكتوبر، طول ما احنا صف واحد وإيد واحدة، مفيش حاجة هتقف قدامنا. واحنا بنحتفل النهارده بذكرى حرب أكتوبر المجيدة، نقدر نلخص ال50 سنة اللي فاتوا من عمر الجيش المصري في 3 كلمات: عبور، إنقاذ، إنجاز. ستة أكتوبر، 50 عاما من العزة.
فيلم مهم وعظيم. تحية لكل صناعه وتحية لكل حد بيساهم في توثيق وتخليد ذكرى نصر أكتوبر العظيم، النصر الأهم والأغلى في تاريخنا الحديث. زمان وينستون تشرشل قال: التاريخ يكتبه المنتصرون. لكن دلوقتي للأسف كتابة التاريخ بقت متاحة لأي حد، خاصة إن احنا في عصر السوشيال ميديا وتداول الأخبار بقى أسهل وأسرع بكتير. فتلاقي ناس عينوا نفسهم
the people who made themselves historians on the pages. Everyone would write what he wants. Someone would say that Cleopatra, for example, is from an African origin. If you ask him, do you have an evidence? He would say no. Someone would tell me the pyramids were made by aliens. Another would say this earth is not round. Everyone writes his edition of history without showing any sources. We find today, for example, after 50 years of October victory and the full withdrawal of Israel, some people post raising doubts about the victory of Egypt. Is victory measured by the number of likes? That's why today is so important. It's so important to get together and tell our history as it happened. It's important to remember our heroes and soldiers so that the truth would always be there, and we, the generation, would give it to the next generation and document it through songs, movies, and documentaries and articles. And the young people would know about everything that happened. No one chose his country, but he chose to sacrifice himself to protect his country. And at the time there was no social media, there were letters. I did not live back then, but the letter then was something special because it was the handwriting of the writer. And when the postman would come with a letter from a soldier or a fighter, it was a great incident. A letter in which he would say his greetings to his mother, his father, brothers and sisters, and every relative. A heart-to-heart letter.
سلامات حبيبتي والتحية وحشاني ومش ناسي الهدية بكتب لك انا من قلب سين عن انهزام اللي معادينا واحلى يوم في العمر جه المشهد يومها كان رهيب حبيبة راجعة للحبيب حرب هي حرب كله كان بيقول يا رب وادي العالم والارض اهي طمنيني عالناس في مصر واللي في بطنك عامل ايه قولي لابوك راجع بنصر بارض الشبر فيها قصر ما قلتليش هنسمي ايه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احميه كل حبة رمل شبك كل حاجة فيها منك الأرض حرة زي دمك مجنون اللي يجي جنبك ده التاريخ يشهد عليه حضر لنا أكلة حلوة وراديو نسمع جوه غنوة عن نجومها وعن عينيكي كلمة ليها وكلمة ليكي نغني لحد تاني ليه مش قلت ليكي عندي ايدي راجع معايا الارض دي واخرة الجواب سلام سلام بجد ومش كلام عاشق وجاب نصره بايديه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه علشان تاريخنا انا اللي احميه
عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احميه
سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احميه
السيد الرئيس السادة الحضور بنستأذن حضراتكم في استراحة ومن بعديها نستكمل احتفالنا بيوم
And then we'll continue our ceremony.
أهلا بحضراتكم من جديد. بنعود إليكم مرة أخرى في هذه التغطية المباشرة لفعاليات
in this live coverage for celebrating the Golden Jubilee of October victory. Welcome back, dear viewers. It is an opportunity during the break to remember a lot of things that happened during the first part of the ceremony celebrating the 50th anniversary of October War. Ahmed and the viewers followed the participation of the president in the 38th educational seminar for the 50th anniversary of October War victory. The intervention of President Sisi sent a number of clear messages. There was more than one message. The president, in a lot of his interventions and a lot of events, talks in simple words that would be understood by all Egyptians. He talked about the national challenge while describing the 9th of June 1967. This was the day when Egypt announced that it will defeat the defeat. And people took to the streets saying, we are going to launch a war. And the president said, let us not distort this value, because challenging the defeat was the source of power to launch the war and be victorious. The president also mentioned the elements of comprehensive power, and he said that late President Gamal Abdel Nasser was an element in this national power, and this is a strategic term. People who study in military academies know that they study the elements of comprehensive power. Each country has a group of elements. The first is the people, the morale of the people, and the second is the military, the economic, and the political. So 4 feet on which all countries stand. 1967 defeat, whatever the term used for describing is, has hit all elements of comprehensive power. It was a bitter defeat for Egypt and all the Arab nations. So this is the first element. The second is the political power, and here late President Sadat was one of the elements of this power, because late Gamal Abdel Nasser had the political influence of Egypt in the third world and not only in Egypt or the Arab region. The third element was economy. As you know, before 1967, Egypt did not have any debts, and the state budget was, of course, different from the current budget, and this was one of the lessons of 1967. So the military strike that hit us depleted our wealth and our economy, and also the president talked about the fact that we needed 50 years to rebuild the army, as said by the Israeli forces. So this was the case on the 5th of June 1967. We can take these elements and remember what the president said about the 9th of June. The national challenge on the 9th of June, because this people was coherent and united enough, although they said the president weeping and announcing his resignation despite challenging the defeat, these elements wouldn't have been rebuilt, rebuilding the armed forces, rebuilding the economy. And then the victory of the 6th of October that made Egypt impose its will to be the foundation of peace. That's why the president said in 1973 Egypt did not achieve victory only, but it made a leap because it was able to come back on its feet again. The president also referred to the article of Mr. Mohammed Hassanin Hikal. I think he was talking about this article, Greetings to Marshal Burleif. And it is said that this article was part of the strategic maneuver, because the article used to be published in Al Ahram newspaper and then it would be read on radio, and the article of Mohammed Hassanin Hikal was the title of political changes in Egypt. So in this article he said that we need to see peaceful solutions, and the military action is so difficult, especially after building Burleif Wall, and he talked about its strength and how it is difficult to overcome it, and the napalm pipelines. So we should find a political solution. It's much better. This article reduced the morale of the people. So Mr. Musa Sabri wrote in Al Akhbar newspaper another article under the title Greeting for Men. Mr. Musa Sabri said, okay, Mr. Hikal is true in saying 1, 2, 3, but he forgot about the Egyptian will. The president also talked today about the coming generations and the need to continue constructions and raise their awareness. Yes, this is how can we do it? How can October victory would keep inspiring the coming generations, and how can we build upon this awareness? For us, October is not just a memory. We always say that it is the spirit of October. Yes, we are inspired by the spirit of October and this victory. It's a big challenge and not an easy one in this era of technology. But the Egyptian will is capable of doing anything. And being aware of this is the real beginning, because it is a system of awareness, including media discourse, the role of Al Muttahida company through its channels, and this live coverage, in addition to culture. And we need a new cultural discourse to suit the new generations, because things are different. Yes, the generation of our sons and daughters is different from ours. Yes, we need to be aware of what is there in the curriculum. You should not be happy that your children cannot speak Arabic. If your son cannot speak Arabic or does not know the history of his country, this is a disaster. So it is a complete system. But we should not be worried about this country and about this nation. October generation gave a lot to this country and taught us a lot. That's why in the beginning, in the open discussion,
هذا الرجل بالفعل كان شاهدا على
was so important. Mr. Ahmed Abu al-Ghait witnessed war and peace, and he had a lot of information while he was in the office of the advisor of national security, Muhammad Hafiz Ismail, whom he considered to be his role model. Excuse me, Ahmed. We will listen again to Mahmoud al-Aiseli song, and we need back to the points made by Mr. Ahmed Abu al-Ghait and the role of Arab countries and the Arab nations in this great war. Let's watch again the song.
سلامات حبيبتي والتحية وحشاني ومش ناسي الهدية بكتب لك انا من قلب سين عن انهزام اللي معادينا واحلى يوم في العمر جه المشهد يومها كان رهيب حبيبة راجعة للحبيب حرب هي حرب كله كان بيقول يا رب وادي العالم والارض اهي طمنيني عالناس في مصر واللي في بطنك عامل ايه قولي لابوك راجع بنصر بارض الشبر فيها قصر ما قلتليش هنسمي ايه سموني مصري فهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا انا اللي احميه كل حبة رمل شبهك كل حاجة فيها منك الارض حرة زي دمك مجنون اللي يجي جنبك ده التاريخ يشهد عليه حضر لنا أكلة حلوة وراديو نسمع جوه غنوة عن نجومها وعن عينيكي كلمة ليها وكلمة ليكي نغني لحد تاني ليه مش قلت ليكي عندي ايدي راجع معايا الأرض دي وآخرة الجواب سلام سلام بجد ومش كلام عاشق وجاب نصره بإيديه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا أنا اللي أحكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه علشان تاريخنا أنا اللي أحميه
عشان تاريخنا أنا اللي أحكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا أنا اللي أحميه
سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا أنا اللي أحكيه سموني مصري وفهمت ليه عشان تاريخنا أنا اللي أحميه
والآن ننتقل إلى همام مجاهد
And now we'll go to Hammam Mujahid and Nancy from El Manara International Conference Center to follow the celebration of the Golden Jubilee of October victory. Nancy and Hammam, back to you.
مشاهدينا الكرام اهلا بحضراتكم.
Welcome. We are still celebrating the Golden Jubilee of October victory. We have seen the first part of the 38th Educational Symposium, during which President Sisi asked the participants to stand in respect to Ras al-Aish heroes. And this is an important event to talk about its heroes and this battle. This battle is a very important battle. It was one of the first battles of the Egyptian armed forces. After 1967, Ras al-Aish battle came only 6 weeks after the defeat of 1967. Israel was able to occupy Sinai except for Fuad. And this area is considered to be the only that did not have the Israeli forces. Yes, and the Israeli forces in the morning of the 1st of July tried to control Port Fuad, and they tried to attack the Egyptian posts there, and they made ambushes, yet our forces were able to destroy 3 of the Israeli tanks, and the enemy attacked them once more, but he failed in getting into the city, and a number of the vehicles of the enemy were destroyed, as well as 22 soldiers who were killed and injured. So the Israeli forces had to leave Port Fuad, and our forces proved that despite the defeat, it's still capable of struggling, and they were able to lead this battle for 7 hours, preventing the enemy from getting even 1 meter inside Port Fuad city. Ras al-Aish battle was mentioned by President Sisi during the first part of the ceremony, and it was a must to mention some information about this battle. Dear viewers, let us make use of being here celebrating the 50th anniversary of October victory and remember the genius things about it. First, selecting 2 p.m. for the war, because it is an unexpected time for wars, as wars usually start in dawn or in the morning. If there is no attack in the morning, usually forces feel that there would be no war. Yes, there are a lot of things about October war that are important. Mr. Ahmed and Ms. Riham talked about some of these points. One of them is from the engineering and military aspects, is closing the napalm pipelines under the canal. This material, if released, would have turned into fire and would have killed Egyptian soldiers who would try to cross over the canal. Yet the Egyptian soldiers closed these pipelines with cement and concrete that prevented Israeli forces from using them. If we would mention the great things about October War, they are multiple. Let's talk also about destroying the sand barrier Burlef line along the canal with a length of 21 meters. The first plans was to destroy it through artillery or explosives, and then they changed the idea and decided to make holes in this barrier using pumps, using the canal water, so that the Egyptian forces would be able to go through these holes, and this idea amazed the world. And this idea was implemented thanks to engineer Baqi Yusuf Zaki, who took this idea from the idea of getting into the sands of the high dam when he was working as an engineer there. And also an important thing was using the Nubian language as the code. So they decided to use it as the code to share commands and orders between soldiers during the war, especially that the Nubian language is unwritten, so the enemy would never be able to decode this language. And that's why they use this language between the commanders and the soldiers. These are some of the great things, and this makes us remember when President Sisi, when he talked about things from 1967 up till 1973, and he said that Egypt made a leap, and he repeated this leap. Yes, there are a number of things that the president mentioned. We can assess the change during the 6th of October. There was a popular challenge and will to defeat the enemy, and they also mobilized all the resources and the capabilities to confront the enemy, and we had armed forces that was able to face any challenges. We can see the similarities between the conditions back then and the conditions now. We have a lot of capabilities and potentials also, and we still have a strong army in addition to the will of the people and the will of the state that is keen on confronting all these challenges, and the result would always be victory, of course, as the victory of the 6th of October. We'll be able to overcome all the socio-economic challenges. Yes, the similarity between the 6th of October war and the current challenges make us remember being inspired by the spirit of the 6th of October victory, sharing stories and relating them. A lot of stories were told about October victory, but the Egyptian story would always be the most important and the most honest one. We can put a main title for this, which is increasing the awareness of the coming generations through direct contact with them, or through arts, media, press, culture, and other tools that can be used to increase the awareness. So we need to share this awareness and this experience with all the coming generations. The Golden Jubilee for the 6th of October victory would be an opportunity to put a full image before the coming generations about difficult great years during which we crossed over defeat to victory. Let's remember and not live in the past. We are only remembering to learn from the lessons of the past. We remember this victory and its lessons so that the new generations would recognize their ability to create a new dawn every day and to create a new, brighter future. And as we did the impossible 50 years ago, we will be able to overcome the challenges and difficulties, and the story of this nation would be craved and recognized. Thank you, Nancy and Hammam. Let me tell the viewers that I was glad and felt proud that I was selected along with you to do this live broadcast on Al Muttahida screens and channels, and to be with the viewers from Egypt and the Arab world. A great coverage on a great day. 50 years of October victory It is a day of history, so it's great to be here from Extra News studio, and this is something that we write on our CV. Don't you miss Extra News studio? I did not leave it and I won't leave it. Nancy and Hammam give us information about important battles. And Hammam talked about the napalm pipelines. Who taught the Egyptian fighter not to fear the napalm? It's his creed. Who trained him? And who told him you're stronger than the napalm? It is the Golden General Abdelmenam Riyad, the Chief of Staff of the Egyptian army. He used to be part of the trainings with the soldiers. He used to do exactly as what they would do, so that the combatant would overcome the fear. The president talked about the Egyptian army and how it overcame fear. Yes, because in 1967 he did not fight. The president here talked about how the community is, and that the strength is the coherence of the people. When talking about the 9th of June, and that we defeated the defeat on the 9th of June, and the reconstruction and building a state for war was a very big plan that needed a lot of efforts from an exceptional political leadership like late President Anwar al-Sadat, and selecting the commanders who would lead this war and continue the rockets wall. Besides, of course, the strategic deceit, the battles, and them all. When we read history and see what happened on this day, as we said in the beginning, it was almost a miracle. If you look at the Egyptians and the nature of the Egyptian army and its creed, you will find that it is not a miracle. This is what was predetermined for our nation, our country, and our army. Egypt should win, and this is normal. Can anyone say that Egypt would be back after a terrorist group rules it? No one would have ever thought of that. Would have anyone thought that a state with 2 revolutions in 2 successive years would be back? When we go 11 or 12 years back, if you are still in 2012, you would say, can a country have 2 revolutions? Yes, when there is a group that is threatening the existence of this country, and when this country is Egypt. It was fake awareness that led to full collapse in 2011, and if it was not for the 30th of June and double the people who took to the streets in 2011 took to the streets in 2013, no one can say something different now. Let's also talk about awareness. The president talked about the importance of having awareness for this nation. A vivid awareness regarding October, because October is a lesson of challenge. It shows a patient community, a proud one, that enjoys dignity. It gives also a lesson in believing in the Egyptian nation, believing in the greatness of Egypt and the strength of the Egyptian army and the unprecedented military planning. People who read in the strategy, those who read the history of wars, will find that the 6th of October war is unique. The crossing over is unprecedented. The crossing day, the airstrike. The Soviet Union said if you would do this, your losses would